The story begins with a blonde girl talking about a dream she had the previous night in which she dreamed that she was dying. The guy sitting next to her suggested that it was a bad dream. The girl laughed and said that you can't speak like that in the palace. Soon after he sighed and said that it could have been a prophetic dream, he advised to go and listen to the fortune teller who came down. The girl smiled and said that all this was invented by their ancestors to pass on power through the royal lineage. By the way, even if many people believe in it, it doesn't mean that it's true. The guy said that he understood all this, but wasn't she the one talking about a meaningless dream? The girl sighed heavily and asked if he could be a little more serious. For the first time in a long time, she invited him into the garden to sit together. The guy looked at her in surprise, then looked back at the book and said that even now she was wasting his precious time. The girl ignored his disinterest and said that they could continue talking about her dream from yesterday. Thanks to this dream, she was able to look at herself from the outside. She felt as if her soul had left her body. There was pitch darkness around her and the sounds of the sea waves, and he was the only one who was near her. The guy at that moment said that he would be identified as the most influential criminal and arrested. Our heroine smiled admiringly and said that she wanted to see it. After all this was an ancient wizard sitting in front of her, imprisoned under royal guard. The guy looked at her saying that she loved to cause him trouble. The girl laughed and told him that everyone who saw him wanted to rip off that mask. The guy replied that he didn't wear a mask, and if you took off his skin, all that was left was flesh and bones. After that, he turned his head and asked if she was sure about tomorrow. After all, the judgment based on real facts would finally come true. At that moment, the wind lifted our heroine's hair into the air. Lost in thought, she said that he had a premonition, and she thought that it would be good if he were next to her. The guy, without stopping reading the book, said that if she had the ability to predict the future, then she could do whatever she wanted. Unexpectedly, our heroine said that he could take care of loving her. The guy instantly slammed his book shut. Getting up from his chair, he said that if she brought up the subject again, he was leaving. The girl, perplexed, asked Kilts Iskadian to stop. She asked to look at him. Kilts turned his head and asked if she was going to order him to kneel. The girl looked at him in surprise. Looking into his eyes, she said that he was not a knight of the royal family, but an all-powerful wizard of the ivory tower, and she was absolutely ordinary. The guy said she was a commoner related to Bookbo by blood. She worships him as the incarnation of Ingram. The girl replied that she was not talking about social status and other people's opinions. She said this to interest him. She added that he always likes to listen to something special and interesting. The girl reached out to Kilts and began talking about the dream she had spoken about earlier. In this dream, she was close to death, but she was not afraid as others would have been. The reason for this was that he was next to her. His eyes seemed to have been looking at her for 2 months. That's why she wanted to thank him. But after that, she only walked behind his back. They were in the darkness, and she grew in that darkness where it was impossible to see anything, and together they walked toward the starry sea. The guy asked in surprise what the end of that journey was, and the girl responded by reminding him that he was a wizard who knew everything. She asked him to answer her. Even her death would not leave him indifferent. Just one day, even for a moment, could he love her? The action moves to another time period. The girl was running across the field thinking that something was missing here. She knew that lambs and horses lived here. There were villages, a spacious sea, and something else. Here she is! Our heroine picked a small bouquet of flowers and looked at it with admiration. Soon she became thoughtful. Looking at him, she asked herself, "Will Daddy like this gift?" After this, the girl turned her head in surprise and asked the sheep why she was eating these beautiful flowers. With a heavy sigh, the girl said that she too would like to eat only grass, and then she would definitely never be hungry. Then she raised her head and looked into the distance. A vast, endless sea stretched out before her. The girl, of course, was delighted, but at some point she decided that it was worth returning. After that, she noticed something strange out of the corner of her eye, so she decided to turn around to look at it. At first, she saw a bird's wing, so she thought it was a crow, but something was wrong. Her eyes felt strange, so she scratched them and immediately noticed that it was a person and not a crow. Our heroine didn't understand who could have come here, but she came closer to make sure that he was not dead. Removing the stranger's hood, she noticed that his face was incredibly beautiful, but what was that on his eye? The girl immediately assumed that he was crying, so she began to reach out to him to wipe away the tear. The moment she touched him, the stranger's eyes began to open. Our heroine jumped up in horror and ran away. Her shocked scream spread over a radius of 200 meters. The guy didn't even have time to introduce himself. Seeing the girl, he asked in bewilderment if it was really Rose. He couldn't believe his eyes, so he even pounced on her, grabbing her by the shoulders. Not understanding what was happening, our heroine began to scream even louder. Soon the girl was able to escape from the hands of the unknown man, and as soon as she did so, she began to run away as far as possible. The action takes us to the nearest village where various activities were in full swing. Residents were trading, tending to the home fires, and so on. In turn, our heroine burst into her home in horror and immediately slammed the door. A man immediately approached her and in bewilderment began to shout and ask her where she had been hanging around all this time. The man angrily continued to say that the house was a mess and she had to clean it all up. The girl began to say sheepishly that she had been picking flowers on the rocks. Suddenly, the girl's hand felt a strange tingle, so she turned her gaze to it. The owner of the house sat down on a chair and took a sip from the bottle and asked why he should waste his free time on such nonsense. He ordered her to lick every corner of the house. The girl could do nothing but quietly nod her head. While she was doing her job, the man continued to be indignant, asking how she could become so impudent and useless. He sighed heavily and said that his whole day was wasted whenever he saw her. The girl was upset by her father's behavior because she had hoped that he would be kinder if she brought flowers. However, because of that guy, she couldn't bring the bouquet. Anyway, at that moment, she stood up and told her father that she would bring him some water. The girl approached the front door to leave the house, and as soon as she opened the door, she noticed in front of her the stranger she had met in the forest. From such a surprise, she again screamed in bewilderment and horror, and her cries resounded throughout the village. The man stood up from his chair in confusion and asked his daughter what was wrong with her. Why was she screaming like that? The girl, her voice shaking, asked the stranger how he had ended up there. The guy in turn said nothing. He just silently glanced at her and then at his father, who was standing among a whole pile of empty wine bottles. What he saw evoked nothing but contempt. In any case, he took a step inside. The man screamed in confusion and asked who he was. Entering someone else's house is illegal. However, Kilts asked only one question. How old was the girl? The man asked, again puzzled. He then said that his daughter was now 10 years old, but what did he want from her? The wizard sighed heavily and muttered something under his breath. He soon said that he knew how it would sound, but he would say it straight out. Kilts wants to take this child. The man immediately screamed in bewilderment and asked how he dared to take his child and talk about such things. Pointing the bottle at the stranger, he said that he had literally fallen on their heads and was now talking nonsense. The man told him to get lost. Kilts, however, preferred a more effective method to 1,000 words, so he simply took out a bag of gold and placed it on the table. The face of our heroine's father instantly changed. He asked in bewilderment, "Is he really going to give so much for this girl?" The wizard was not a man of many words anyway, so he simply asked if that was enough. The man fell to the ground and began to say that that was enough. Kilts said he was glad, but now they had to calculate everything sensibly. The man raised his head in bewilderment and asked what it meant. The wizard said that he must understand that for such a sum, one could buy a whole castle, and he thought that it was worth even more than that, but he did not understand its value. Kilts crossed his arms and added that they should discuss how much its price had dropped. The wizard asked the man directly if he had ever beaten his daughter. He immediately began to nervously scratch the back of his head. Kilts was not stupid, so he could determine when a person was lying and when he was concealing something, so he removed some of the gold coins from the pile. Soon he raised his head and looked at the man again, asking if he had ever scolded her silence again. Kilts's eyes instantly filled with contempt. The wizard separated a portion from the pile of gold coins again. The questions that followed were, did he teach her to read and write? Did he care for her at all? Did she even have a childhood? Obviously, the man could not answer positively to any of these questions, so in the end a small handful of coins was offered in exchange for the girl. The wizard said that this was the exact amount he could pay. In that moment, the man was overcome with rage. He began to shout and ask in bewilderment if he understood how he suffered raising this shameless girl. The wizard responded to this by saying that he could have not given him the gold, but simply cut him down, so it is worth thanking the girl that this simply did not happen. Hearing these words, the man even fell to the ground in fear. He did not want to say anything against this psychopath. After some time, our heroine began to approach her father, asking if he would give her to a strange uncle. However, there was no answer. The girl, perplexed, continued asking her father, hoping to hear an answer. At that moment, the man turned around, and gold coins fell from his hands. The father asked his daughter with a strange smile if she was obedient. The girl immediately understood what this meant, so she began to ask her father not to give her away. He, in turn, said that this uncle would feed and dress her well. Our heroine began to panic because she could not believe what was happening, and Kilts sighed and said that he would find them a carriage. The girl continued to beg her dad not to leave him because she didn't want to say goodbye to him. She promised that she would clean the whole house and would do it forever. However, the man pulled his hand away, telling his daughter to shut up because he had no way to refuse. The man was angry, so he kicked the stool and told the girl not to irritate him. After that, he calmed down a little. But looking at the girl, he couldn't help but notice how bad she was. The man sighed heavily. Then he asked her to listen to him carefully, and kneeling down, he said that he should have told her long ago that she was not his real daughter. Hearing these words, the girl didn't even know how to react, because it seemed to her that this was some kind of unfunny joke. In turn, the man began to tell the story of how he accidentally found her on the beach 10 years ago. He thought he might be a lost child of the aristocrats, so he decided to take him. The man took her in the hope of receiving a reward, but in the end, no one came to her. After that, he injured his leg and could no longer work. There was nowhere to get money. There was even a feeling that he was being held hostage by her, so he was constantly angry. But nevertheless, at that moment, his voice, as well as his hand, began to tremble. He held up a gold coin. Soon after, he started laughing madly, talking about how he could start over from scratch. Our heroine was in incredible shock because on that day, she learned and felt too many emotions. After that, she sighed and said that she would go with that man. The girl's father was glad to hear this. After a while, Kilts heard the sound of the door opening, so he turned his head. In front of him, he saw Rose, but for some reason her hair was cut. Kilts looked at the man in confusion and asked what the hell he was doing. What had he done? The man replied that now they could dress her up more beautifully. Kilts assumed that he was taking him for a fool and even decided to sell the last lock of hair to someone. In any case, he hugged the girl and said that she was now his child, and if he tried to reach out to her, he would quickly lose them. Looking at him with a piercing gaze, Kilts said that he should be glad he didn't do it right away. Then he turned to the girl and said that he had not found the most comfortable carriage, so he hoped that she could be patient for a little while. However, our heroine has never ridden in a carriage and she has nothing to compare it to, although what difference does it make if she was just sold? At that moment, Kilts looked at the girl and her bag in surprise and asked if these were all her things. The girl nodded her head quietly. Having lifted the girl, the boy said that they would take another carriage as soon as they arrived at a larger village. A couple of seconds later, they settled into their places, and our heroine's father continued to watch them with his gaze. The girl understood that today he was honest with her for the first time, so she wanted to ask him most of all, had he ever loved her? Our heroine looked at the man and thanked him for raising her. Finally, she also advised him not to drink as much as he had been drinking before all this. Immediately after these words, the coachman ordered the horse to run, so the carriage moved off. The man still wanted to say something, but it was too late. After a while, they were leaving the city, so the girl turned around and began to look at her native village for the last time and say goodbye. Soon she sat down in her seat and began to cry. Kilts could not help but notice this, so he asked in surprise if she really loved him. Of course, there was no answer as the girl tried to hide her tears. The boy, surprised, told her that her father had been harsh with her all this time. And yet she wiped away her tears, saying that it didn't matter. An image of that same energetic and cheerful girl suddenly appeared before Kilts's eyes. He muttered something under his breath. Our heroine closed her mouth in bewilderment, wondering if he was angry. At that moment, he simply lowered his head down as if he was trying to say something. Our heroine was in anticipation of these words, and she also didn't mind looking at him because he was always turned away from her. Suddenly, the cart hit a rock and they started shaking. The girl immediately grabbed her mouth, trying to hold back. Kilts suggested that she close her eyes and then it would be easier. Our heroine was still able to overcome this urge, and soon after that, she decided to remind him that during all this time, he had never... The guy interrupted her and said that her name was Kilts. The girl asked if she understood correctly that Mr. Kilts, to which he answered that for her, he was just Kilts. The girl thought about it. She wanted to know what was going on. By the way, Dad said that she could be the daughter of aristocrats. At that moment, she also remembered how in one of the bars, he said that there was still slavery in Izmikan, so it was necessary to sell the girl there. Our heroine had no idea what slavery was, but he sold her anyway and got the gold. The guy at that moment decided to ask her name. The girl, who was still lost in her thoughts, looked at Kilts in surprise and said that her name was Asha Konak. At that moment, the girl, perplexed, began to ask why she had been chosen. There were plenty of other children in the village. Kilts, perplexed, asked what she was talking about. Soon the girl calmed down and said that she was even glad that they bought her. Asha looked at the man and thanked him for giving her father money. Kilts asked in surprise why she was thanking him. The girl forced a smile onto her face and said that perhaps her father would be happier with them than with her. These words touched Kilts so much that it was scary to even think about how much this freak neglected her. He had to finish him off right away. However, he said the words about killing him out loud, so tears appeared in Asha's eyes. The guy, perplexed, began to say that this was not what he wanted to say. He wasn't angry at her, and by the way, she still doesn't know where they're going. The girl asked dejectedly if they were really going to Izmikan. Kilts was certainly surprised by this answer, but said that it was not so because they were going to mountainous Corinthia, because this was the only way to leave the steppe. The guy asked if she knew where it was. Not hearing an answer, he said, anyway, it's next to Nurmaz, although you can't call it a country, just land separated from Kaldrogan. There is also a village called Lees on the border of the steppe, and at that moment Asha leaned on Kilts's arm. The guy was surprised. However, he was glad that she had calmed down and was able to sleep, so he covered her with a blanket and let her rest. After a while, the action takes us to the city that Kilts spoke about. Everything here was new to our heroine, so she looked around in admiration. The guy started saying that Liège is located on the edge of the steppe, so there are always a lot of travelers here. The city itself is not very big, but there are several good hotels. However, Asha was shocked by these words, because looking at all these buildings, it was very strange to hear that this is not a very big city. At this point, Kilts turned to the girl and said that before going anywhere, she would need to pick out some new clothes. Our heroine was embarrassed at this point. She was a little ashamed, but she had never seen anyone who wore such old clothes. But the girl, of course, agreed to go and look at the clothes, but something stopped her. Kilts asked what happened. She raised her head and said that she had no money at all. Kilts looked at her in bewilderment and said that he would pay for her. Asha immediately decided that this would increase her debt, so she said that everything was fine and that she did not need new clothes. Kilts asked if she had a change of clothes. The girl quietly said that she didn't have any other clothes, but she could wash what she had on. In that case, he asked in surprise what she would wear while these clothes were drying. Asha thought about it at that moment. Kilts sighed heavily, took her hand, and led her along, telling her that she should just follow him. Our heroine understood that this was very bad because then her debt would increase. However, after a while, the action takes us to the shop. The guy happily greeted the gentleman, saying that they have free rooms. Kilts asked for 2 single rooms with meals. The guy said they would do everything now and they could pass. In fact, the guy immediately headed towards the stairs and started climbing them, and Asha followed him. By the way, they never bought the clothes, and our heroine couldn't understand how she could repay the debt. After a while, they came to the room and Kilts asked her to come in. The girl opened it and saw all this beauty. She even thought that it would not be a pity to give 3 writs for this. In any case, they looked, and that's enough. The girl ran into another room. Kilts asked in bewilderment where she was going. Taking her in his arms, he brought her back and pushed her into the room, saying that she needed to rest and that he would leave for a while. Soon the door slammed shut and the girl was left alone inside. Asha couldn't understand, could this man have gotten into the wrong room? The girl decided to wait a little because he would soon understand what had happened and the limit. At that moment, a voice was heard from behind. Asha happily turned around as if she knew that this would happen. However, there was a girl standing in front of her who said that she had drawn a bath. Then she asked if Asha needed help. The girl began waving her hands and head in bewilderment, saying that this was not her room. The girl was surprised by this. She immediately looked out and looked at the sign near the door, saying that she didn't think so. Moreover, she said that her dark-haired companion sent her here to look after her. In any case, she needs to wash quickly before the water gets cold. After a while, the action takes us to the bathroom where our heroine was lying and warming herself. The nanny asked her if she needed help. Asha immediately got up and started bathing, saying that everything was fine. At that moment, the girl even realized that she had never bathed in such hot water. Suddenly, the nanny said that a change of clothes would be outside the door, so Asha would have to go downstairs as soon as she finished. As soon as the girl came out of the bathroom and looked at the clothes, she realized that Kilts still did it his way. After this, the girl began to think that this guy probably just cared about her. As soon as our heroine got dressed, she headed up the stairs to go down to the dining room where Kilts was sitting. The girl came up to him and thanked him for the bath and new clothes Kilts, oddly enough, was still reading. Turning the page, he said that all this was nonsense and these clothes were for the first time. Later, they would buy something better. However, Asha began to shake her head, saying that this would be enough for her. Soon after, she assured Kilts that she would work hard to pay off the debt. These words even made the guy freeze. He looked at the girl in bewilderment and asked how much debt they were talking about. The guy sighed heavily and said that he didn't know why she thought that, but there was no need. The girl was confused again because he was angry with her. What happened? However, she decided that she shouldn't give up, so she leaned over and said that she was good at cleaning. She also said that she gets along well with people and even looked after Mrs. Linda's baby, so she thought that she could become a nanny, and then she would pay off the debt. Then she thought about what else she could do. She remembered that she could climb and scramble well, but she didn't know if it would be of any use but before. At that moment, Kilts slammed the book shut. The guy asked her to stop talking about it because he couldn't listen to it anymore. Looking at the girl, he asked her never to say such a thing to him again. These words incredibly hurt our heroine, and she was confused. It took Kilts a moment to realize what he had just said, so he began to tell the girl that he hadn't meant it. However, at that moment the waitress came and brought the food. Looking at Asha, she said that after bathing she looked like a little noblewoman. Anyway, she put the food on the table and asked the girl not to be shy and to eat. Soon after Kilts told her that she could eat, the girl immediately began looking at all this wonderful food in delight. Asha started grabbing everything that was within her reach and enjoying all the food. Kilts looked at her and asked if it was really that tasty. The girl smiled and said it was delicious. At that moment, Kilts smiled back and said he had gone to the stable. It was not easy to find a wagon with a roof. In any case, he said that they would now be able to cross the prairie safely. Asha looked at him in surprise and asked what the prairie was. Kilts asked if she didn't know about the Nirmaz steppes. It had to be crossed to get to the rest of the continent, but it would take at least a month. Our heroine asked again in surprise. The guy repeated, saying that this was a prairie. There would be almost no settlements along the way, so supplies needed to be prepared. Kilts also said that many people say that a demon lives there. The girl was scared, and the waitress said that he is often found there and he was not there before. At this point, she pointed to a group of people and said that they were also going to travel across the prairie so they could go together. By the way, they were traders. However, Kilts sighed and said that he couldn't stand noise. In that case, the girl laughed and said that they should take one sheep. That way they would distract the demon. In turn, Kilts assured her that they would not need it. At this time, our heroine was not herself. At this moment, the girl was horrified and wondering one question. Was Kilts really using her instead of a sheep? The room, the clothes, even the food. Could this really be her last supper? Kilts looked at the girl in bewilderment and asked what was wrong with her. Asha turned her head nervously and sharply and said that everything was fine. In turn, she decided that he could not be trusted. The action moves to the next morning. Kilts was already on the street near the cart. Asha came out to him and he told her that it was time for them to go. Our heroine had her things back and was ready to go, but her condition wasn't the best. Kilts noticed it too and decided that she had even gotten thinner. As soon as they set off, the waitress started to see them off and tell them that she hoped nothing would happen to them. Finally, she wished them a safe journey. Our heroine smiled back and thanked her for the comfort. However, the words about the safe path made her wary. She looked at Kilts and decided that this couldn't happen to him. In any case, the wizard just looked at the road and drove. By the way, they were now heading towards the Grave of the Winds. After a while, they found themselves in a completely empty field. Our heroine looked around in bewilderment. Everything here was new to her. Kilts assumed that this was her first time seeing the prairie with her own eyes, so he asked her how she felt. Asha replied that it was amazing, it was so big, but all you could hear was the sound of the wind. The wizard said that there are many mystical places on the continent, and the Nirma's Step is one of the top 3 magic trains or teleportation scrolls become useless here. To put it simply, he said that magic doesn't work here, although this may seem like an advantage. However, when it comes to enemy invasions, this could backfire on them as the territories were isolated from the rest of the continent. The guy said that while railroads were being built in other places, the Nirma's people felt abandoned, so they separated from Caldrogan. Asha said that she understood everything, and then looked into the distance, and seeing huge mountains, she asked in surprise how big the world was. Kilts immediately reached into his bag and soon pulled out a map. He said it was a map of the continent, and the prairie they were now crossing was marked. The girl began to look at the map, thinking that it was quite small. Would she be able to visit all these places? Suddenly Kilts looked at the girl and asked if she wanted to go too. Just as suddenly he fell silent. Asha looked at him in surprise and asked what he was talking about, but Kilts asked her to forget about it because everything was fine. However, at that moment, Kilts saw several silhouettes in front of him, which meant that someone was approaching them. After a while, a group of men ran up to Kilts and Asha asking if they had come from Lee's. The wizard nodded his head and said that everything was correct, but what did they need? The guys immediately advised to turn around because there was a demon on the way. They also asked not to ask them what troubles this monster had brought them. The guy suddenly sighed and asked the strangers if they knew he hadn't been here before. Some thought it was a bad change. Looking at them, he advised them to at least return to the city for weapons because the demon was very strong. However, at this point, Kilts told them that they did not look like Nirma's natives. The brunette looked at the stranger in bewilderment and asked how he understood this. He explained that the people from Nirma's would not have taken the body away, but would have buried it on the spot. The boy smiled, saying that the gentleman had good intuition. They were merchants from STA. Had they heard that Nirma's was famous for its high-quality wool? He explained that they wanted to establish trade but ended up getting into trouble. However, Kilts sighed and said that they would somehow manage on their own. The 2 merchants snorted, saying that it would be their own fault, and the brunette said in surprise that Kilts looked like he had never held a sword. In any case, he warned. They finally said that no one could know what might happen. Soon after, their paths diverged. After a while, it got dark and started to rain. Covering himself with his hood, the guy said that his intuition had never let him down. Looking at Asha, covered with a blanket, he said that they would stay here today. Thus, the horse moved slowly forward, and inside the cart sat our heroes. Asha didn't know how or what to say, so she sat silently. At that moment, Kilts broke the silence. The guy asked the girl if she was afraid of the demon. Our heroine, in turn, looked at Kilts and thought that he seemed much scarier to her. At this point, the guy said that the people they saw could have been the cause of the demon's appearance. If they weren't lying about coming from Astier, they could be scouts for the construction of the railway, which is why they were so nervous. They look like specialists for preliminary inspection of the territory. These are definitely not traders, no loaded carts, workers, etc. In short, these guys lied to them, only pretending to be traders. Asha asked if he was sure about that. Of course, the guy said he wasn't too sure because there was too little information. Firstly, it's impossible to use magic in the steppe. That's a fact. The demon's appearance is a side effect of the human invasion. If they hadn't tried to use magic here, the demon wouldn't have appeared. And now it's a vicious circle fighting demons with magic which creates them. Very strange. Asha trembled listening to this story. The guy suddenly said that she didn't have to be afraid of anything because she was safe with him, and he guaranteed it. At that moment, he extended his hand outside and said that the rain would soon stop. It would clear up in the morning, and it was best to go to bed now. After that, he looked at the girl and said that she better not listen to the sounds outside at all. Asha was even more scared by these words, so she asked in surprise why this should not be done. Kilts looked at her with his piercing gaze and said that this way she would be safer. After a while, Kilts was asleep, and our heroine was lying under a blanket looking up at one point. She suddenly stood up because she was wondering how long it would take to get to the village if they didn't have a cart and a horse. By the way, she was interested in why it was necessary to go all the way to this village. Looking at this guy, she couldn't understand what he was planning. In any case, she just didn't want to die, and there's no point in thinking about unnecessary things. At that moment, strange sounds began to be heard from outside. An unfamiliar voice seemed to be calling Asha to itself. Our heroine immediately decided that these were the sounds Kilts was talking about. It's very scary. However, the voice did not stop calling her. At some point, the girl even realized that this voice was similar to her father's voice. The voice said that everything was right. It was him, so it was time for them to go home. The girl immediately tore from her place and began to stretch forward, asking if it was really him. The voice asked in bewilderment, would she really not recognize her own father? In any case, he suggested going home. He decided that it would be better for him to return every penny and take her. So he told Asha that it was time for them to go home. The girl was incredibly happy that her dad came for her. Now the girl understood why Kilts asked her not to listen to the sounds. He knew that Daddy would come back for her. As she climbed out of the carriage, she even wondered why she should listen to this stranger at all. The girl began to follow the voice and even ran across the field. She asked where her dad was, to which the voice said that he was nearby. She was looking forward to their meeting so soon she finally came out of the bushes in the hope of seeing her father, but in front of her, she saw an unfamiliar and strange light silhouette that was calling her. Our heroine instantly changed her happy smile to a nervous one. It's definitely not Dad. Moreover, she realized that it was not even a person, so she began to run away from it and scream, and the silhouette rushed in pursuit. The girl ran in tears, thinking about how scared she was. She could not see anything in front of her and wanted to get home as soon as possible. Suddenly she wondered, does she have this house? In any case, the monster's hand was getting closer and closer. At some point, the monster almost grabbed the girl, and she finally screamed the name Kilts. At that very moment, lightning flashed, and then more lightning. A wizard was hanging in the air. Soon, the guy started blowing up everything around him. Loud and bright flashes started to be heard. Of course, he couldn't do this just like that, so he prematurely protected the girl with a protective bubble. Our heroine was incredibly surprised. Was it magic? She suddenly remembered her father's words. The man told how he once saw a wizard when he was a mercenary. The guy could move a mountain in an instant and turn the sea into a desert. It might even seem that he was not a man at all because his powers were incredible. At this moment, Kilts turned his head towards Asha because he wanted to say something. His eyes were filled with rage. The girl was horrified to realize that he would think that she wanted to run away and might demand that she return all the money. Remembering her father and his parenting methods, she even suggested that he might hurt her. However, the guy ran up to the girl and grabbed her, trying to bring her to her senses. Asha only started screaming in horror. Kilts tried to calm her down, saying that it was him, and the girl kept apologizing, saying that she really didn't mean to do that. She didn't even think about running away. However, no screams followed. Kilts hugged her tightly, telling her that he had lost her and could barely find her. The guy repeated the same phrases with tears in his eyes, telling Asha that he thought he would never see her again. The girl looked down in confusion and asked if she really was not used as bait. Kilts, perplexed, asked what she was talking about, and she answered that she thought she would be given to the devil, and if she ran away, Dad would get nothing. The guy was in incredible shock, so he couldn't even say a word. Kilts covered his face with his hand, and tears started rolling down his eyes. He said that it was definitely not like she said she was wrong, he didn't take her for this. In that case, Asha decided to ask why he needed her. Why did he take her? Without a doubt, Kilts said that he wanted to make her happy. Our heroine's face instantly changed. She doesn't have to worry about money, and he can swear to it as many times as he wants. He would give a continent just to have her by his side. Asha asked in confusion why he treated her like that, to which Kilts replied that she was a very important person to him. The girl didn't understand what he was talking about because they had only met 2 days ago. How could this be true? That's the only reason she looked at him and said that she didn't deserve such words from him. In any case, by this time the rain was gradually stopping, so Kilts decided to get up. In the same way, the guy extended his hand to her, telling her that she needed to get up, otherwise she would get sick. Just a couple of minutes later, the weather cleared up again and the sun started to come out. Kilts suddenly told the girl that he had asked many people about her. Asha asked in surprise if he was her father. The guy said that it was not so. Her father was another person, but he could not say who it was yet. In any case, she was very dear to him. Taking her hand, he said that for that reason alone, he must protect her even at the cost of his life. The girl was incredibly shocked by these words, so she said that she could not give anything in return. Once again, Asha noticed that Kilts's face had changed, and that alone made her think that he was angry with her again. However, to her surprise, he put his hand on her head and began to stroke it. What was going on? The girl raised her head in surprise and still couldn't believe what was happening. Moreover, it seems like Kilts is sad now. The guy finally broke the silence at this point, telling her that she didn't have to give anything back. He had already been paid enough. Asha suddenly asked if he was angry. Kilts asked in surprise what she was talking about. The girl reminded him that she had run away, although she was not allowed to. The guy in turn said that it was only his fault because he did not explain it properly. He thought that she would be too scared if he told her the details, but it was good that the protection worked. And again he stroked the girl's head and she lowered it down in surprise. The girl said that she heard her father's voice. Asha tried to connect her thoughts to say what she was feeling, but the tears came to her eyes faster and faster. She soon gave in to her emotions and burst into tears in front of Kilts, who immediately hugged the girl. At that moment, our heroine herself understood that her dad would never come for her, especially so far away. He would never calm her down or pet her, and yet she hoped to see him. After some time, the girl came back to normal. She was ashamed. Kilts, however, was with her all this time and helped with her runny nose and tears. Soon the girl said that she wanted to sleep and that she had no strength. Kilts looked at her in surprise. After that, he immediately wrapped her in a blanket and picked her up. Now we can return to the cart. By the way, the morning was very bright. Asha did not understand where the sun rays came from if it had rained recently. At this point, Kilts said that everything was fine because there were no more mirror spirits here. She could sleep peacefully. The girl asked who he was talking about, to which the guy replied that that was the name of that creature. They whisper to people what they most want to hear. In that case, the girl asked Kilts what he heard. The boy asked what she was talking about. The girl asked what he heard from the mirror spirit. Immediately, the silhouette of a blonde girl appeared in front of his face and addressed him. He soon came to his senses, so he said that he had not heard anything. Everything was fine. However, immediately his gaze changed. He looked down in disappointment. Asha watched his emotions. At some point, she began to think that he was lying. She would really like to know who he was thinking about when he met the mirror spirit, but sleep unfortunately overcomes her, so now is not the time to think about it. Kilts picked her up and carried her to the cart. Zamrin Nagordlak Reitza. Our heroine desperately tried to read the names of the cities. Kilts laughed and said that she read everything backwards. She would need to be taught to write. Asha soon looked at the map and said that the continent looked like a dragon. The wizard said that the ancient people thought the same, so the myth of the giant dragon appeared. Our heroine looked at him in bewilderment and asked what this myth was. Kilts said that it was quite famous. One day, a giant dragon saw a golden bird in the sky, which he immediately chased but never realized until the end of his life that he was not destined to catch it. This story became a legend about the origin of the continent. Asha was puzzled and asked if such dragons really existed. Kilts immediately said that this legend was very old. The guy added that although dragons exist, they are not that big. In that case, the girl asked what they were like. The guy looked ahead and said that they were maybe the size of this lake. Our heroine happily raised her head, saying that she was now even more curious. By the way, she decided to ask where their house was on the map. At that very moment, the guy saw in Asha's smile the very smile that made his heart skip a beat. It froze in the same way now, so he couldn't immediately say where and what. Soon, the guy came to his senses and started pointing his finger at the map, saying that it wasn't very far left. Looking at a piece of land that looked like a dragon's wing, Asha asked if that was their home. Kilts said yes. The girl then asked if there was anything special there. The guy thought for a moment and then said that there was nothing special there. In that case, she asked in surprise why they needed to go there. Kilts didn't know what to answer to that question. After some silence, the guy finally said that it was indeed too difficult a question. Our heroine smiled and happily asked if he would be glad to return there. Kilts smiled back and said that that was correct, that was the reason. In any case, it was already getting dark, so it was time to go back to the hotel. The girl said, at the end, that she would like to swim in the lake tomorrow. The action takes us closer to the Hotel Mountain Pearl. Our heroes were heading towards it. Meanwhile, something strange was happening near her. A whole crowd of people were standing around the cart. Because of this carriage, it was impossible to get inside the hotel, so a crowd of people piled on it to turn it over. Kilts knew it would probably be a long time, and he had hoped it would be quiet when he chose this place. At that moment, our heroine noticed that the wizard next to her was whispering something to himself, so she stared at him in surprise. At that very moment, all the people noticed that the carriage began to glow and soon turned over. The guys who were pushing the carriage were surprised because for a second it became light as a feather. Meanwhile, our heroes rushed to the hotel. As soon as they entered, Asha immediately turned to Kilts. The guy asked what she wanted to ask. The girl stopped and asked him how long he had been studying magic. Kilts looked at her in surprise. He was of course surprised by this question, but decided to answer by saying that he had studied magic for 10,000 nights. The girl lowered her head in bewilderment and began to try to count on her fingers how much it was. Soon they sat down on the veranda. Asha put her head on the table in shock, telling Kilts that she envied him. Suddenly, a strange girl approached them, apologized for disturbing them a little, but asked to chat a little. Kilts immediately said that he didn't like it, so he declined her offer and asked her to leave. However, the girl remained where she was and assumed that she would not be mistaken if she said that it was they who helped them. Kilts still wasn't buying it, so he said he had no idea what she was talking about. The girl replied that her father-in-law was also a wizard, so she understood everything at once. Our heroine, by the way, noticed that this was the owner of the carriage. However, the girl thanked the man for helping because no one was hurt. Even the most powerful Astir sorcerers cannot use magic without tools. She was very interested in where he studied and even wanted to thank him somehow. Although she could not offer much, but these words were sincere, she suggested having lunch. Kilts in turn refused, saying that he had done nothing to deserve such generosity. At that moment, an awkward silence hung between them, and the girl didn't even know what to say. At that moment, she looked at Asha and asked the little lady if she was this wizard's apprentice. Kilts intervened in the conversation and said that this was his niece, and he was looking after her for some reasons. Her questions were already going beyond the bounds of decency, so he asked her to leave. The girl apologized, saying that this little lady was the same age as her child. In any case, she wished them bright memories on their journey. Our heroine was very surprised after hearing about the child, so she became interested in who they were talking about. At that moment, a guy with red hair peeked out from behind the woman's skirt. The guy immediately started waving his hand. Soon he approached the girl and whispered in her ear that next year he was entering Franger and would also become a wizard. Immediately after these words, he turned around and followed his mother, who was already approaching the exit. Kilts sighed, saying that they were disgusting, and our heroine asked him in surprise what Franger was. The wizard asked if she was talking about what that guy had said. She immediately nodded her head. Soon, he said that Franger is an educational institution in Astir. In simple words, a school of magic. The nobles of that country send their children there. Asha asked in surprise if children could really become magicians without 1,000 nights like Kilts. The guy replied that it would be hard to call it real magic, but it was true. Our heroine sighed heavily, saying that this boy will go there next year. It must be very interesting. After that, she turned her gaze to Kilts and asked if he had fun learning magic. Without thinking twice, Kilts said that he hadn't had any fun learning this. Not for a moment. The next day, the action takes us to a clothing store. Asha was saying that she had never worn dresses like this before. The girl assumed that it didn't suit her very well, but all the consultants were perplexed and said that it looked great on her, and she could be sure of that. They all looked at her with admiration and said that she looked just like a doll and also that she had very beautiful blonde hair. The girl said that now many people come on vacation, so they prepared so many outfits in advance. For example, this lace was specially flown in from Astir. Asha just thought it looked great, but she probably doesn't suit something that expensive. However, the consultants grabbed the girl's hand again and pulled her towards other dresses showing different fabrics. They started to lead her around the entire establishment, showing her everything they had. After a while, she was dressed in a pink dress, which seemed to look even better. The crowd of consultants began choosing the next outfit options while Asha stayed close by, helping her tie her dress. At that moment, she asked the girl why she had such short hair, because with long hair, she would become even more beautiful. Our heroine wanted to say something about her father, but at that moment, a joyful child's cry was heard behind her addressed to her dad. The little girl ran to her daddy saying that the dress she was wearing was very, very beautiful. The man agreed with this, so he decided to buy it. The girl was very happy about this, and Dad said that if their beloved little lady wanted such a dress, then he would be only too happy to buy it. Asha, of course, couldn't help but hide her envy because she had never had anything like this. At that moment, a consultant approached her asking which outfit she liked the most. She was surprised and said that she didn't even know what was best. Suddenly, the door of the store opened and inside was Kilts, who was staring intently at the girl. The girl looked at him in embarrassment, not knowing what to say to him. Didn't he like it? At that moment, he went to the consultants while simultaneously saying that the dress looked good. After some time, our heroine was finally able to get out of this nightmare. She sighed heavily, thinking that her daddy had never given her anything even close to this. Asha still couldn't understand why he was so kind because they weren't even close people. In turn, Kilts bought all the dresses that both he and Asha liked. She would never have thought that there would be someone who would value her so much. At that moment, Kilts came out to her. The guy asked in surprise if something had happened. The girl laughed and said that everything was fine, so he didn't need to worry. After a while, our heroes went back to their room. Asha suddenly turned to Kilts. The girl looking at the floor asked him if he wanted to be her daddy. At that moment, Kilts almost fell. The guy raised his head in confusion and asked Asha what she had just said. The girl was very scared, saying that she just thought that. Kilts, however, interrupted her, saying that he didn't mean to scare her and he wasn't angry with her. Either way, the mood was ruined for both of them. The guy looked guiltily at the girl, but soon they moved on again. Passing shops along the way, the guy constantly looked into the windows and asked Asha if she wanted anything jewelry or maybe a bag. The answer was the same. No. Our heroine walked and thought about the fact that she could not even imagine all the luxury jewelry and so on, so it was hard for her to even look at her. However, at that moment, she noticed something in her peripheral vision, so she stopped. The girl stared at one point with delight, and Kilts asked in bewilderment what had happened. However, she in turn pressed herself against the display case and could not even say a word. Kilts, looking at the doll, said that it is automatic. It repeats several movements set by magic. He supposed that for such a size it was quite good. Asha turned around in confusion and asked if this was magic too. The guy replied that it wasn't quite like that, rather it was a magical device. In any case, he asked if she wanted one. There was no doubt that the girl wanted it, but it was very expensive, which didn't really allow her to say yes. Asha sighed and said she didn't want to. However, Kilts stood his ground, saying they could buy her if they wanted. The girl looked at Kilts with surprise and joy at the same time and said that if so, then she really wants her. After a while, the action takes us to the evening Asha was sitting with her new doll and admiring her. Of course, at that moment they were on the shore of the lake, just like yesterday. Suddenly, Kilts broke the silence, asking the girl if she wanted to return to her father. However, there was no response from the girl. The guy immediately said that he bought her for money, and he has no excuses. That's why he wanted and wants to give her everything he can. Asha started saying that she doesn't need it. The guy smiled and patted her head and asked her to be a little more honest. He hoped that he could spoil her at least a little. Looking at her with the same sincere smile, he asked her to tell him only the truth because he would buy her anything and listen to any whims. The girl smiled back and said that she liked everything very much anyway, and it was true. Suddenly, Asha asked if she could sit on his lap. Kilts was surprised but said she could do it. The girl was just about to get up when suddenly Kilts felt someone approaching, so he instantly turned around, covering the girl with his body. The man who approached them scratched his beard in surprise, saying that he had not even thought about such a meeting. The man smiled and said that when he came to them, he hoped that they were the ones. In any case, he did not expect to meet them in the village of Corinthia. The guy looked at the man in surprise and asked what he was doing there. He in turn asked him not to be so rude. He replied that it was just a fun family trip. His wife wanted to go north. By the way, shouldn't he grant her wish too? Still, Kilts was wary of these words, so he asked in surprise if they were really traveling through an ordinary village. The man stared at the wizard, saying that he was still sharp-tongued. His tone had not changed at all. At that moment, he discovered that Kilts was there with a companion. Realizing that he was talking about our heroine, she became very tense. Of course, the guy wasn't going to let the girl be hurt, so he told the annoying old man that it was none of his business. In turn, the man smiled and asked if he really wouldn't even allow himself to be introduced. Looking at the wizard, he said that he hoped that Kilts had not forgotten noble etiquette during this time. At this point, our heroine looked out in surprise to see what was going on and who this grandfather was. Suddenly, the man's face changed. She began to scream in confusion and ask who it was. Turning his gaze to Kilts, he asked if he had really done what he thought. Hearing no answer, he became thoughtful, saying that whatever it was simply amazing. The man asked her name. Not hearing an answer, he asked her to answer him, but Kilts remained silent. Asha, meanwhile, was thinking that the man was kind, but unexpectedly for herself, she began to feel a strange feeling. Kilts turned to Count Kaizuyu, saying that it was impolite to talk about etiquette. The man asked what was wrong, since he was not here just for him. He immediately asked the girl to come to him. The man smiled and started to stretch his hands towards the girl. Of course, she was very scared, so she started to tell Kilts about it. The boy grabbed his hand and told him not to even think about touching it, otherwise he would teach him the etiquette he held so dear. Seeing no reaction, Kilts suggested that he should see how far he could twist his arm. Kaizuyu tensed, saying that such actions were far from noble. Kilts squeezed the Count's hand sharply, and he, perplexed, told the wizard that his nature had not gone anywhere. The guy in turn replied that he too was still as selfish. Our heroine watched all this in bewilderment, not believing that Kilts could actually break his arm. However, the girl turned to him to ask him not to do this. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Count Kaizuyu immediately jumped aside. He laughed, saying that this reunion was too touching. The guy in turn asked not to call him that. The Count replied that addressing a person by name is a sign of friendliness. Soon after these words, the man nevertheless headed in the other direction, still saying that they would see each other soon. Kilts immediately looked at the girl and asked for forgiveness, but our heroine said that everything was fine. The girl asked who this person was, but heard a sigh and words that it was better not to think about it. She was undoubtedly very surprised and thoughtful. Asha wasn't stupid enough to not guess that this man knew something about her. In any case, it was time to go back. After some time, the action takes us to the city, and the day of unexpected meetings was not over. A strange guy with a scar on his face greeted Iskadian, saying that he thought he was somewhere at the end of the world and did not know that he was exploring a continent. Kilts just sighed heavily because he didn't expect to meet Altman here either. At this moment, Count Altman approached again, glad that they had already met. As he said, yesterday's reunion was wonderful. He personally allowed the Ivory Tower alumni to meet. Kaizuyu asked Kilts how he felt. However, the guy replied that they had never been close friends. Altman laughed and asked Iskadian for forgiveness. The guy also said that to tell the truth, he missed him a lot. Kaizuyu smiled and told the boys that they were similar. He also offered to take the girl. Our hero said it was stupid if they thought he would let the girl go. The Count laughed and said it didn't matter. Count Kaizuyu took out his watch, saying that everyone had heard that the Kaizuyu family always gets what they want. Kilts looked at him in bewilderment, saying that their kind still had no dignity. The guy asked if the cane was by any chance a relic of Egeron. He had paid for lying to the authorities and had wandered like a wolf. The man smiled and said that he had even begged the man. Kilts assumed that he was going to fight him with only a piece of magic stolen from the dragon. Count Kaizuyu said that it was all true and that he couldn't do it alone, but Altman also wants to tear Kilts to pieces, so he couldn't help but call him. The guy immediately put Asha on the ground and told her that she should go home for now. When she arrived, she would be met and they would have to say that he had sent her. Our heroine looked at him in surprise and asked how he was. The guy replied that he would follow her. The girl still wanted to ask something before leaving, but at that very moment, blood spurted in her direction. The action takes us some time forward. Some guy was standing over a girl and trying to ask something. Asha finally started to come to her senses, so the guy asked if she was okay. Without waiting for her answer, he still extended his hand to help her up. However, our heroine did not understand what was happening and where she was because she was sure that Kilts had followed her. One way or another, she needed to figure out what to do. Now, She extended her hand to the guy who asked again if she was okay. Asha finally responded saying that she was relatively okay. Taking the girl's hand, the guy thought about something and soon their hands began to glow. Our heroine looked at the boy in surprise and asked where Kilts was now. Probably a stupid question. The guy continued doing his job, however, and soon said that Kilts had not yet arrived. The girl asked when he would return, to which the boy said that he should return soon. Asha scratched her head and said she understood. She still felt awkward talking to her peers. At that moment, the guy looked at her and asked how their trip had gone. Our heroine thought, was it really about a trip across the prairie? However, the question could have been about her vacation. The girl thought about it and said that it was interesting. The guy smiled and said that he was very glad about that. In any case, it was time to go because the old man was waiting for them. Our heroine asked who they were talking about. The guy in turn asked not to ask unnecessary questions. The girl apologized and soon asked if he really knew who she was. Without a doubt, he said he knew. Turning his head, he told her that she was a star. Our heroine looked at him in bewilderment and asked again in bewilderment because she did not understand what this meant. However, there was no answer. The guy just smiled mysteriously and continued walking forward. After some time, they approached the house on the door of which the guy knocked a certain number of times. Our heroine, looking at this building, asked in surprise where they were. The guy said it was a wooden house. At that very moment, a puzzled old man came out of the house asking who dared to knock on his door. Asha shyly started saying that her name was Asha Konak and that Kilts had sent her here. Hearing the girl's name, the old man's eyes even started to bulge. How could Kilts think of this? The old man, confused, started talking about something of his own, so Asha decided that they had come to the wrong place. The old man shouted, asking Kilts how he dared to trust him with a child. A moment later, he came as close to her as possible. Our heroine was very surprised by this, so she asked him to move away. The man did just that. He walked inside, confused, muttering under his breath about why they were in the north. Our heroine now couldn't understand what was going on and whether she could come in. After all, she hadn't heard his permission, but was she really supposed to stand here all night? At this point, the bewildered old man shouted and asked why she wasn't coming in. Was she really going to stay with the forest beetles? Already in the house, the man handed the girl milk. She of course understood that now was probably not the right time to drink milk. Soon, Asha spoke up, saying she didn't know where to start, but she thought Kilts was in danger. The man replied that he had a guess. Maybe Kaizuyu and Altman were watching him, then a quarrel started and they fought? In that case, there's no need to worry. He sent her here so she wouldn't see violence. Our heroine asked in surprise if Kilts was really that strong. The old man laughed and said that the boy was strong and compared to him the other two were like little children. Asha even shuddered at these words. In any case, she decided to ask the old man if he really was Kilts's teacher. The man laughed, saying that sand was already pouring out of him, so how could he be a teacher? Moreover, he didn't even know how to use magic. Our heroine looked at him in surprise and asked if he really couldn't use magic. He replied that he had been able to do it before, so he could show her the rest of his knowledge. Asha didn't know what to expect, so she watched carefully as the old man's hand reached towards his eye. In just a moment, her face changed to one of shock, because the old man had done something incredible. He found an eye in his hand, which he pulled out. Asha immediately began to scream. The old man laughed and said that it was a magical instrument. It was as if a magical eye had been implanted into his body. The girl asked again in surprise. He explained that other people thought it was innate because they had never encountered anything like it. Anyway, he said it was late, so it was time to sleep. They had one spare room. The guy immediately intervened and said it was dirty and therefore they couldn't sleep there. The old man asked in bewilderment how this could happen if he had asked him to clean up there. The boy drank his milk and told the old man that he had asked him not to shout. He said he was going to get some sleep, so he asked not to be disturbed until he woke up. The old man still said he had to clean up. The boy replied that he had not received such an order. The man sighed and said that these guys only knew how to talk. In that case, Asha would sleep in Pram's room. Finally, he asked him to make sure he cleaned the room tomorrow. The guy approached the girl and said that they had to go. His room was on the second floor. In any case, the guy grabbed her hand and pulled her along. All Asha managed to do was wish the old man good night. In turn, the man mumbled something to himself. For example, that they were very similar. He didn't understand what Kilts was thinking about, and our heroine in turn didn't understand what this man was talking about. In any case, after a couple of minutes, they were in the room. Prom approached the girl and handed her pajamas. The girl immediately put on her pajamas, but that was not all Pram wanted to do. At some point, the guy pounced on her and started rubbing her with a towel. Asha didn't understand what was happening, but as it turned out, the guy simply wiped away the blood. As soon as he did this, he turned to the girl and asked if she was okay. Our heroine smiled and touched his hand, saying that everything was fine. Before going to bed, Pram asked him if he should turn off the light, to which the girl said it was scary. The guy smiled and said he would leave the light on. Having wished each other good night, the boys turned in different directions. After some time, our heroine got up because she simply could not fall asleep. Her doll was broken and she was worried about it. Opening the window, the girl wondered if she asked Kilts to fix it. Would he be able to do it? However, he is not here. Soon looking out the window, she realized that she missed him. She looked outside for a long time, but Kilts never returned. The action takes us to the next morning when the girl finally woke up. She was surprised that Prom had already left. Asha noticed only her mechanical doll next to her. Unfortunately, it no longer worked. After some time, our heroine left the room, and the smells from below simply fascinated her. As it turned out, the reason for this was Pram, who had been preparing delicious food since early morning. Our heroine wished them a good morning and asked if they had slept well. The man said that everything was fine and then pointed to a chair and asked them to sit down. The girl immediately asked what about Kilts, but the old man said that it had not arrived yet. Asha, by the way, could not understand what kind of big book it was and how the old man read it. Just then, Prom told the old man not to read the newspaper while he ate. The girl asked what it was, and the boy replied that it was a collection of everything that had happened in the world printed on paper. The man was very surprised at this point because he couldn't believe that she didn't know about newspapers. He asked how she grew up. He immediately handed her the newspaper so that she could read it a little and get acquainted with it. However, as soon as she picked up the newspaper, countless letters appeared before her that she could not put together. The man looked at the girl in bewilderment, thinking that all this would be difficult. He immediately asked if she really couldn't read. The girl looked away in embarrassment and said that it was so. However, she was incredibly ashamed, but what should she do? Pram, while he was eating, noticed that the girl was not particularly comfortable, so he decided that she needed help. The guy approached Asha and said that he would help her learn the letters quickly. Our heroine asked in surprise if it was true. Immediately, Prom began to tell her what she needed to know. The old man was thinking about how this house had turned into a kindergarten in just one day. In any case, he asked the children to stop chatting and eat better. Our heroine took the plate and said that there was a lot of it, and in response, she heard that she was thin, so she needed it. After a while, the action takes us to the forest where the girl came. She assumed that she should have gone with Prom. However, the guy disappeared as soon as he ate. Our heroine also ate and said that she wanted to go for a walk. At this moment, our heroine was pleasantly surprised because while she was walking in an unknown direction, she reached a huge greenhouse. The girl came closer to look inside, and as soon as she did, she was surprised at how beautiful it was. She had heard that glass was very expensive, and here all the walls were made of it, just think. Suddenly, she noticed someone inside. As it turned out, it was Prom, who, by the way, also noticed the uninvited guest. After a while, the girl was inside, and the guy was giving her a tour. He was telling her about different plants that she liked. Looking at the thorny plant, she asked what it was. Pram replied that it was a cactus, a southern plant that lives only on the peninsula of the waxing moon. Our heroine roughly remembered the map and realized that it was very far away. Asha painted how he ended up here. The guy immediately answered that he was raised with the help of magic. He also added that with magic you can do anything our heroine couldn't argue with. That absolutely true. Growing southern plants in the north for magic is a piece of cake given the power of Kilts. Our heroine immediately fell silent for some unknown reason, and she didn't look particularly happy. Prom asked if she was sad, to which she nodded. The girl asked if he knew Kilts. The guy said he knew. He shows up here sometimes and then leaves right away. Asha admitted that she was very nervous, even though her grandfather had told her not to worry. Pram looked at her in surprise and asked why. The girl explained that the reason for her worries was that he was wounded during the battle. Prom thought about it and said that everything here was created by him, even this garden. The girl asked if they could create something like this with magic. The guy thought for a moment, then shook his head, saying that only Kilts could do that. Our heroine decided that he really was a great wizard. By the way, at this moment, the girl also realized that Prom was trying to calm her down. She immediately began to thank him for his support, and also asked him to tell Kilts that it was nice here. Prom nodded his head and then suggested that she sit down and rest. Our heroine immediately went to the table, and as soon as she sat down, she took her doll out of her pocket. Pram noticed this and asked if he understood correctly that this doll was her friend. The girl looked at it and said that Kilts had bought it, but unfortunately it broke on the way here. It would be great if it could be fixed. Pram thought about it and soon asked to give him the doll. For a second, he wanted to look at it. After a quick inspection, the guy said the spell was fine. It was just that the blow had run out of mana. He needed to pour it in and the doll would work. Our heroine asked in surprise what mana was. Prom told her that it was a substance necessary for using magic. Asha then asked where she could get it. The guy raised his hand and replied that she could take it right here. It was everywhere. Our heroine still answered that she didn't see anything, to which the guy said that she could only be felt. Soon he asked her to close her eyes. Asha was very intrigued, so she did as she was told. And yet after a couple of seconds the girl opened her eyes, realizing that she felt nothing. Pram thought for a moment, and after a few seconds he extended his hand, telling her to take it. Asha extended her hand, and as soon as Pram took her hand, he said that she would feel mana through him. The girl tried her best, and at some point even decided that he was making fun of her because it didn't look like what was needed. As expected, nothing happened. However, at that very moment something incredible happened because their hands began to glow. The girl immediately jumped up from her seat, waving her arms. Asha asked in confusion what that just was, to which Pram answered that it was mana. The girl immediately began to ask excitedly if she could fix the doll by simply pouring mana into it. Would she be able to do it? The guy said that he didn't know for sure about one, so he would help her. Our heroine took hold of the doll and began to concentrate. Soon she began to feel a strange surge of energy. A moment later, she opened her eyes, and to her surprise, the doll came to life again. Asha jumped on Pram with hugs, saying that the doll works again, and immediately she ran to her grandfather. A moment later, she ran into the house, starting to scream and call for her grandfather, who was just cleaning. He, perplexed, told her not to run around here with dirty feet, and the girl, without even catching her breath, began to say that she was able to fix the doll. The man, however, did not understand what she was talking about, so he asked her to catch her breath and then talk to him. Our heroine immediately handed over the living doll, saying that she had fixed it. Taking it in his hands, the man asked in surprise if it was automatic. He didn't know if children played with something like that these days. At this moment, Prom, who was standing behind her, said that she had fixed this doll herself by pouring her mana into it. The man knelt down in confusion, asking the girl if Kilts had taught her this. Asha replied that it had not, so he asked how she had been able to do it. The girl began to speak shyly about how Prom had helped her because otherwise she would not have succeeded. Looking at her evil grandfather, the girl asked with horror if she had done something wrong. She simply couldn't find a place for herself in her thoughts because she didn't know what to do. Nevertheless, the old man laughed and patted Asha on the head and said that she was a good girl. She learned to work with mana. There are very few children with such talent. He also said that when Kilts arrives, she should ask him to teach her witchcraft. He will tell her everything in order. Our heroine asked again in surprise. The man explained that Kilts was the court wizard of Caldrogan himself. He had many students, although teaching someone is hard work. The girl asked again in surprise. The man explained that a court wizard is a magician who reports directly to the ruler. Asha wondered if Kilts knew what she had done. Would he praise her like her grandfather had? She really hoped so. The action shifts to a week later. Our heroine was meanwhile walking down the street when she suddenly noticed Kilts. Without thinking twice, she ran to him with hugs, as she had been waiting for this meeting for a very long time. Of course, the wizard was also glad to see her, so with a smile on his face, he asked if she was doing well. Asha said everything was fine, and then asked if he was hurt. The guy said she was only hurting his pride by looking at him like that. Soon after, he stood up and asked where Hazkan was. Asha asked again in surprise and said that if he was talking about Grandpa, then he was here. At that very moment, he ran out into the street and began waving his stick, trying to hit Kilts, who was dodging the blows at that time. The wizard looked at Hazkan and said that if he was so active now, he shouldn't complain about a sore back. Later, Hazkan was outraged that he had been gone for so long, and he was the first to hear it. Kilts looked at him and asked if it was really fashionable in Corinthia to greet people by waving your fists. Hazkan told him not to change the subject. How did he do that? Pointing his finger at the girl, the man said that he had found a girl exactly like her. Asha immediately thought about these words because, if you think about it, Count Kaizuyu said the same thing. So the girl immediately asked who she resembled. Kilts hung his head guiltily and said that now was not the time to talk about it, so he would tell her everything later. After that, he came up to her and, taking her in his arms, said that it was time for them to go inside. Our heroine looked at him in surprise, wondering why he couldn't answer her question. She wanted to ask him a lot, but unfortunately, there was simply no opportunity. It would be better to do it later. The action takes us to the next morning. The boys were just about to have breakfast. By this time, Kilts, who had just unpacked all his things, began to come down to them. Approaching the table, Hazkan looked at the boy and asked if he would eat with them. He turned his head towards Asha, who with all her appearance begged him to sit with them. The boy happily said that he would eat with them, so he began to sit down at the table. However, Hazkan was against it. They soon began to eat, but our heroine interrupted him and said that she would like to show him something. After he nodded his head, Asha, without thinking twice, took out her doll and showed it. Kilts was surprised that she kept it. Did she really like this doll so much? The girl smiled happily and said that she liked it very much. However, at that moment, she also said that this doll was broken, so the girl thought, trying to remember the word mana or whatever they call it, she poured it into the doll and fixed it. Kilts certainly didn't expect to hear those words, so he immediately squeezed the doll, telling the girl that she shouldn't have done that. The guy said he would fix it himself next time, and that was not all he could do. Looking at the girl, he said that he would buy her everything she wanted, so there was no need to use magic again. After this conversation, there was a dead silence at the table, as well as an awkward atmosphere. After some time, our heroine was lying in her bed and did not understand why everyone was using magic, but she could not. The child she met at Lake Arendon, Pram, and Kilts all know how to use magic. Even her grandfather said she had talent too. Just at that moment, Pram came into the girl's room, worried that she had left so abruptly. Approaching the girl, he asked how she was feeling, but Asha was lying under the blanket, all in tears. She attacked Pram with hugs, saying that she didn't know what she did wrong. The guy told her that she didn't do anything wrong. He wiped the tears from the girl's face and said that Kilts wasn't mad at her. He was just scared. Asha asked in surprise what that meant. The guy explained that she would find out about it later. The girl asked if she really needed to know anything. However, Pram silently hugged her and did not say another word. Our heroine thought about it, but still thanked him for his support. The girl decided to ask Kilts again, so she left the room. At that moment, Hazkan asked Kilts if he had killed him. The guy replied that he couldn't spare him, so he made him suffer eternal pain so he wouldn't die soon. Hazkan suggested that Kaizuyu must be sick too, since he said that the remnant of Egeron brought something strange. Kilts replied that he was looking for it, but it looked more like a toy. Soon after a short silence, Kilts decided to ask how Asha learned to control mana. Hazkan said in surprise that he himself did not know, because she did it herself. She wanted to fix the doll, or something like that. Kilts asked if he was sure he hadn't taught her how to use magic. The man turned to the wizard and asked him to tell him where he had found a child like her. Hazkan said he even thought Kilts did it. The guy in turn hit the table, saying he can't say everything. The man asked the wizard if he and the man were related anyway, and again, silence. Hazkan added that he could buy a new doll. He didn't even need to use magic because it seemed like she could fix it herself. The guy replied that she didn't need to know about magic. He didn't care how talented she was. He wasn't going to teach her. She just didn't know anything. Asha had been listening to their conversation the whole time, so she was very surprised. Hazkan asked in bewilderment if Kilts really wanted her to spend the rest of her life living in the mountains and playing with toys without knowing how the outside world works and without friends. Kilts in turn said that the outside world was terrible, so she did not need to know about it. Hazkan asked him if the wizard thought that she thought the same. With a heavy sigh, the guy said that he didn't know how different the world she lived in was from hell. Hazkan immediately jumped up, trying to hit Kilts on the head, saying that it was not for him to judge. However, the guy still dodged. With a heavy sigh, the man asked again where he had found her. Kilts replied that he had found her in the northern part of Nurmaz. There was a retired mercenary with her. Hazkan sighed again, saying that it was a village, so he wasn't surprised that he didn't even know its name. However, he noticed that Asha was very smart, which meant that Kilts could become her teacher. The guy again reminded that he did not intend to teach her magic, so he refused. Hazkan didn't know how to react anymore, but he still asked again if he was really going to raise her like this. Without thinking twice, he nodded his head. The man asked what he meant. Was he going to adopt her? Kilts was confused and asked if he had to obey the system. Hazkan hit the table and said he was an idiot. Even Jay said that when she grows up, she will go to school and learn a lot. The wizard, however, said that teachers are better than the ivory wizard. Hazkan, in turn, said that he was talking about friends and maybe someone more than just a friend. Hazkan wanted to know what he was so proudly agreeing to. Even when that time came, he would not be able to spend it smiling as if nothing had happened. Kilts asked in bewilderment if the old man was really hinting at her as a lover. The man asked in surprise if he had brought her with any other intentions. At that very moment, a loud bang was heard, causing our heroine to look out from around the corner in surprise. The Hazkan chair was lying on the floor, and he himself was hanging in the air in front of Kilts. It wasn't hard to guess that the reason for this was that Kilts had lifted him up, saying that the old man should know when to joke and when not to. Hazkan nevertheless snorted, telling the wizard that he was still a brat. At that moment, our heroine let out a terrifying squeak, which caused Kilts to sharply turn his head. The guy's face changed in an instant, and the first thing he asked was how long she had been standing there. The girl immediately thought about it. Should she run away? She began to say, embarrassed, that she didn't want to eavesdrop, but Hazkan nevertheless smiled and waved his hand and said that there was nothing to be afraid of. This guy was terminally ill. He would die if he said a kind word. Kilts, without thinking twice, let the old man go and went to Asha to try to establish contact. The boy extended his hand and apologized and asked if he could talk to her. After a while, the three of them were sitting at the table, but for the first couple of minutes there was dead silence. Kilts finally broke the ritual of silence by asking the girl how much she had heard. She thought for a moment and soon said that she had heard their conversation, starting with the story. About the murder, Kilts's face changed even more, and he said that he understood. The girl turned to him and asked how much money was needed to learn how to use magic. The guy said that wasn't true. In that case, she asked if he didn't have much money, he could still teach her, right? She jumped up and said that she really wanted to learn how to use magic. She would work hard and pay for her studies. She wasn't making any money now, but she would start making money later. Kilts sighed heavily and told the girl that tuition fees were definitely not a problem. Asha then said that if money was not the issue, she would cook and clean the house. However, the guy said that he would not force her to do it. Then the girl said that she would do everything that Kilts asked. Would he be able to teach her at least the basics? And still the wizard began to say that the problem was different. Asha almost climbed onto the table, starting to talk about how she would do everything, study work, help do homework, everything. And still, Kilts stopped her. Hazkan soon intervened, saying that at this rate the whole night could pass. Kilts looked at the girl and asked if she really wanted to learn this. She proudly and confidently said that she really wants to learn this. This is her dream, which she wants to make come true. And again, that same girl who had been in his head appeared before Kilts's eyes. Sighing, the wizard said that he agreed, since he had promised to fulfill any of her requests. There was no point in taking his words back now. The guy reluctantly said that he would teach her magic if she wanted it so much. After some time, the girl was in her room, but she couldn't fall asleep. At this rate, it was even starting to get light. Realizing that Asha couldn't sleep at all, she got out of bed, put on warm socks, and went. Meanwhile, Kilts was in the kitchen drinking coffee and was surprised that the girl had woken up so early. Asha came closer in surprise and asked what smelled so delicious. The guy answered that it was roasted ground coffee dissolved in boiling water. Showing the cup, he said that coffee was hard to find in the north, but Pram had somehow gotten it. Asha looked at the substance and said that the coffee was black as tar. The girl took the cup to taste the coffee, but after a moment her face twisted. She said that it was too bitter. Kilts took it and said that it was supposed to be like that, and Asha decided that coffee was definitely not her thing. In any case, she asked when their classes would start. Maybe now? The wizard sat down on a chair and said that they should not hurry, because the sun had not even risen yet. He sat her down on a chair and asked her to wait, and the girl sighed heavily because she had hoped that she would start training right away. At that moment, she remembered how she asked her dad to send her to school, but he in turn rejected her request and said that they did not have money for such nonsense. She knew she had been waiting for this day for a long time, but fortunately, it had finally arrived. As soon as the sun rose, Kilts called her to him. After some time, they were sitting in the field, and our heroine was looking attentively and joyfully at the wizard. Kilts was even a little surprised because he had never seen her so happy. At that moment, he sat down on a stump opposite her and asked if she knew why winter was coming. Asha was surprised by this question because she thought they were going to learn magic. The girl answered that it was because it was getting cold. In this case, the magician asked why it was getting cold. She immediately thought about it, saying that she was not sure of the answer. Kilts suddenly asked the next question. Had she ever wondered why trees, mosses, grass could grow on this earth? The girl knew the answer to this question. She replied that it was because the soil consists of substances that help plants grow. Kilts then asked the following question: why are these substances in the ground? Once again, the girl felt as if she was at a dead end. How could she know this? And what's more, why did she need to know all this? Kilts at this point tucked his hair behind his ear and asked to watch him carefully. He extended his hand to the grass. At that very moment, his hand, just like the grass, began to glow. Our heroine looked at all this with incredible delight, and the last thing that surprised her was that a living flower appeared out of nowhere. The girl continued to look at this miracle in bewilderment, realizing that this flower was not there. It had just blossomed. The guy suddenly asked if she remembered what he had just done. Asha shook her head and asked how he had done it. The boy explained that he channeled some of his mana into the earth. It was enough to turn a seed into a sprout. She said that plants grow because of the substances in the earth, and that was true. Kilts added that if we speak in the language of magicians now, then mana gives life to these sprouts. The girl immediately assumed that mana gives birth to life. In turn, the wizard continued to talk about how mana exists everywhere. She said that she first saw magic in the pasture, when in fact she had been surrounded by it all her life. The changing of the seasons, the movement of the stars, the ripening of the harvest, the laying of eggs by robins, the smell of fresh bread, the howling of a wolf, all these phenomena are created by the flow of mana. He summed it up by saying that all of this is magical power, the power that makes everything possible, the source of life, the breath of the last dragon on earth. The guy said that a magician is someone who has an innate talent to sense and use mana. By these words, he meant that she should learn magic and not just learn to use it. However, since she has taken it upon herself since he is on her side, it is his duty as a magician to guide her on the right path. Looking down, he said that from today onwards, he would teach her magic. The girl was incredibly happy to hear these words every time Kilts said them. By the way, before they started, the guy said that she should give him a few promises. The girl screamed in bewilderment, saying that if he wanted her to sell her soul, then she would. Kilts sighed and said that there was no need for that. First, he asked Asha to never use magic to harm anyone. Giving a thumbs up, she said that she would never, and had no intention of harming good people or animals. Secondly, the magician asked to use magic only when necessary. Asha looked at Kilts in surprise and asked how she knew when she needed to use magic. The boy replied that she had to figure it out herself, and the girl immediately remembered that she had never seen him use magic for no reason. The girl promised that too. Finally, the guy said that she should never try to resurrect the dead. At that moment, there was silence. Although this request was very surprising, the girl said that she promised not to harm anyone and not to revive anyone. In that case, from now on, she becomes the apprentice of Iskadian, the descendant of the Grey Wanderer. Until the bones of the moon appear under the starry sea, she will be his apprentice. At that moment, he asked Asha to extend her hand. Of course, she, without thinking twice, extended her hand. The guy touched her hand. A moment later, she began to wave her arms in surprise because she felt a strange feeling. Kilts explained that this spell would allow the use of mana. It will disappear after about a day, so she will need to renew it every day if she wants to continue using magic. However, it was time to put the lectures aside. Today's lesson had to begin. The girl was in incredible anticipation, therefore she could not hide her emotions. At some point she decided that she shouldn't act like a child. Kilts, in turn, showed the mana stone that is part of the lanterns they use. It looks like an ordinary stone on the outside, but it glows when in contact with magical power. These mana lanterns have a special process of charging with magic inside them. They are designed to glow when there is a mana stone inside. He looked at the girl and asked if she understood this principle. The girl, although she looked very surprised, still shook her head. Kilts was glad of this. Soon he gave her her first task to make this stone glow as he did. The girl looked at the stone and asked the teacher if he really wanted her to imagine herself as a lantern with mana. Kilts looked at her in surprise, saying that she understood everything very quickly, and he was glad about it. In that case, the girl clenched her fist, thinking that all she needed was to remember that feeling. She was going to make this little stone glow, and that was all she needed. However, in the end, nothing came of it, and the girl was therefore very sad. Soon, another hour passed, and still nothing happened. She tried it one last time. The boy at this point decided to ask Asha where she was when she managed to summon magic. The girl said that she was in the glass garden behind the house. In that case, he suggested that she try there again. Every magician has a place that is most in harmony with his energy. After some time, they finally came to this glass garden. The girl was again in anticipation. When he went inside Kilts, he said that he was very surprised that she found this place because it was very far from home. In any case, they approached the table, and placing his hand on it, Kilts suggested that the student try to use magic here again. The girl said she would be happy to do it, but honestly, she didn't understand the difference. All that changed was the location. Looking at that stone, she couldn't understand how it all felt back then. She really couldn't remember doing it, so about was the first thing she liked. She really wanted to fix it. Soon after, she felt a tingling sensation in her palm, something shapeless, weightless. This something flowed like liquid, but at the same time rose upward. At the same moment, mana began to appear. The girl immediately came to her senses and began to brag to the teacher, saying that she had finally succeeded. However, there was no answer. The wizard sat and looked straight at her, but his face was gloomy. The girl looked at him in bewilderment and asked if everything was okay. Just at that moment, the guy seemed to come to his senses and even jumped up a little. Asha came closer and showed the stone, which was glowing, indicating that she had done it. Kilts smiled and said that she did well, although the stone could be even brighter, but still for the first time it was very good. He then raised his head and said that as he had guessed, this place was compatible with her energy, so they would teach mana control here. Asha looked at the teacher in surprise and asked what "combines with your energy" meant. The guy explained that it was simple. She used her power better here. He also added that each magician has a place where he is best. It can be an ordinary place or even an attribute, that is, some element has an attribute that corresponds to the magician. The guy said that a place with special meaning could also serve such a purpose. At that moment, Prom came into the glass garden saying that he had brought them tea. The guy left the tea in cups and walked away. Our heroine waved after him, but she wished he would stay and drink tea with them. Asha took the cup of tea that Kilts poured and thanked him. By the way, he praised her for learning magic, and now she is sitting in a beautiful garden and drinking tea. The girl felt like a fairy tale princess. Asha suddenly said that she heard that this garden was built by Kilts. The guy froze at that moment and quietly asked if Pram had really told her this. The girl said that everything was correct and then said that it was incredibly beautiful here. She had never seen so many plants, and she also liked the windows. It all looks like a princess's garden. At that moment, the girl also looked at the flowers and asked the magician if he really loved flowers. The guy meanwhile took a sip of tea and soon said that this was not entirely true. In that case, she wondered why he created this garden. She thought that the reason was the flowers, but he didn't like them. Kilts said no, because it was more of a whim than a huge desire to create a flower garden. Soon, there was an awkward silence in the garden again, which Asha decided to break by asking if she could ask a question. Without a doubt, the boy nodded. The girl immediately asked if she looked like someone he knew. Without thinking twice, Kilts gave a short answer. "Yes, it is." The girl asked who it was, to which the guy answered that it was his old friend. Asha asked in surprise if she really looked like his friend. Kilts replied that she looked very similar, and he almost thought that she was his friend Asha. With a sad face, lowered her head and asked where this girl was now. Of course, the guy couldn't say it straight out, so after a short pause he said that she was dead. Asha was shocked by these words. Now she understood why Kilts had called her name the first time they met. He hadn't been looking for her. They had just met by chance, and she just looked like her. The girl then said that she now understood why everyone was surprised when they saw her. Kilts interrupted her and asked her not to worry. Moreover, he wanted to know why she was asking these questions so persistently, but suddenly his face changed. The reason for this was the girl's tears, which came unconsciously but in a whole heap. Without thinking twice, the guy jumped up from his seat and went to the girl asking if she was okay. The girl was shaking uncontrollably, and her tears continued to flow. Kilts tried to bring her to her senses and kept asking if she was okay. However, she began to shake her head. She realized that she wasn't even sad, but why couldn't she stop crying? Kilts told her that he shouldn't have spoken about it so callously, so he asked for forgiveness. The guy also said that he didn't want to talk about his friend in general, and especially not to her. This made him ruder than usual, and he was very disappointed in himself. At this moment, our heroine noticed that Kilts's hands were shaking incredibly strongly. She extended her hands and, taking his palm, said that everything was fine. He shouldn't worry. Asha smiled and said that she was just a little surprised, nothing more. Kilts smiled back at her and said that he should take better care of her. Soon it became a little peculiarity of Asha Konak to hide what she really wants to say. The girl wondered if she had not looked like the person he knew, would he have taken her with him or left her in the village. In any case, after this incident, a rule was established not to raise this topic again. And in general, the girl had never seen him so excited about any topic before. In any case, she knew that until she grew up, Kilts would be kind. At that moment, the guy looked at the tired girl and asked if something was bothering her. Of course, as expected, everything will be fine if she pretends not to know anything. The girl smiled and said that she was thinking about what she could learn during her studies. And immediately, the boy started thinking about all those fun school times where he tried to teach Asha what he knew. At that moment, he stood up from the table and said that today he would teach her something new. Asha asked again in surprise. Kilts nodded his head and asked to come to class at noon. The girl looked surprised and asked if she could come in. The wizard looked at her in surprise, saying that he hadn't forbidden it. Asha thought about how she wasn't surprised that it was difficult. In any case, the girl asked if they would really have their own personal office for studying. The guy said yes, but however, what he said after yes no longer bothered our heroine. She said that she would definitely come. After a while, she was standing in front of the door thinking about what the Kilts room might look like. The girl opened the door and said that she was going inside. Opening this door, she expected to see something like this, but the reality was much worse than her thoughts, because Kilts's office was a real chaos. The girl, of course, was in shock from all around her, but the wizard sitting at the table asked her to go inside. At that moment, our heroine asked in surprise if anyone else had come in here. The guy answered that there was no one here, he was alone. He also thought about it and asked to give him a minute because he would like to find a pen with a flag. He started walking around the room and checking all the drawers each time, saying, "Strange, I thought I put it here." Definitely a funny situation. Our heroine suddenly said that she needed to clean up here. In turn, Kilts said that this was the most ideal setting, so there was no need to do anything. In the end, they never found the pen with the flag. The guy assumed that it was somewhere in the studio above. Asha asked if she should go and look there, to which the guy said that she would not find it. It was better to leave everything as it was for today. At that moment, the guy shook off the dust and, looking at the girl, asked how she used the spell. Showing her hand, she said that the spell he cast was almost gone. The guy then asked how her practice in the glass garden had gone, to which she replied that she was making some progress. It had never worked with magic. However, she can feel magic without letters, but what should she say? She feels like she is locked behind a transparent wall. Kilts said that her feelings were correct. The spell he wrote for her creates a channel between the caster and the mana in the atmosphere. Even the best mage cannot use magic without spells. In any case, from today on, he will teach her the magic that is mainly used by northern mages. At this point, he added that he could not write them separately. He began to move his pen across the sheet of paper. Soon, he picked it up and gave it to the girl to look at. The girl was serious, of course, but she couldn't read it. Kilts said that it wasn't strange because it wasn't a normal language. The guy explained that it was an ancient letter from the tower. They usually use expressions to remember spells. The girl suddenly asked if she could use magic at any time. If she rewrote it many times, Kilts replied that all these spells were one-time use. Once used, it loses all its functions just like a ticket, so she needs to rewrite the spell every time, which means she needs to memorize it. Handing Asha some papers and a pen, he said that this would be her homework for the day. He explained that he would gradually teach her a combination of methods, but first he should rewrite this ancient letter. If it was difficult to use a pen, she could write with something else. Asha asked when she would be able to use magic without drawing it. Kilts looked at her in surprise and asked what she meant. It was literally impossible. However, the girl looked at Kilts in surprise and reminded him that he was using them without a spell. The guy turned his head to the side and said that in his case everything was a little different, rather it could be considered an exception. The very next evening the girl ran to Kilts and proudly showed him the sheets of paper covered with writing. Stroking the girl on the head, he said that she had worked hard, but next time it would be worth paying attention to the handwriting. Asha said that she understood him, and then asked if she could play here before going to bed. Without a doubt, the guy agreed, and Asha happily ran to see everything that was here. At that moment, her attention was drawn to a strange object which was covered with a white sheet. Asha asked what it was. Kilts said it was a research device that worked with magical power. It helped to see distant objects better. Asha asked in surprise how far she could see. Using this, Kilts replied that she could see the stars this way. Pointing the telescope, he asked her to look in that direction. What she now sees is the northern star Asite. The girl quickly looked into the glass hoping to see a clear picture, but unfortunately it didn't look as good as she thought. Kilts said that the quality is directly proportional to the magic power of the wizard. At her level, she can't see it clearly yet. Asha sighed and said she understood. She wondered if she would be able to see better once her magic power improved. Kilts did not answer her question, but looking at her, he called her to ask his question. The girl responded, and the boy in turn pointed into the distance. Asha looked where Kilts was pointing. He asked if she could see Alton from here. It appears briefly in the north at the beginning of summer and then disappears. In the south, it is considered the brightest star. Asha asked in surprise if the stars in the north and south were really seen differently. Kilts answered that it was true. They saw a completely different sky. Even the laws of time worked differently in the south. Of course, the girl asked how it happens. The guy answered that after sunset around midnight, Alton appears. While Alton floats across the sky, it seems as if fog has covered the whole world. People in the south believe that the sun rises and sets twice a day. Asha excitedly said that she would like to see this one day. However, Kilts' answer was unexpected. The guy suggested that it would be better for her not to know the outside world. Our heroine, of course, asked the logical question that was brewing in everyone's head: why can't she do it? Kilts replied that human curiosity always grew in a terrible form because these words were like a knife cutting itself. Asha, however, still didn't really understand the white desert on the Moon Sea, the 7 islands of Ismakan, the great labyrinth of Egeron, which is the dragon's heart. Even the ivory tower that stands alone at the end of the northern sea can be taken into account. The world is incredibly huge. But in comparison to him, our heroine is incredibly small. She did not understand why she should accept this ban. As she began to reach for the stars, the girl said she wanted to know more. She wanted to go there. At this point, Kilts turned to the girl, saying that there was a surveillance machine in the ivory tower much larger than this one. This machine is just a replica of the one in the turret, so their performance cannot be compared. Our heroine looked at the wizard in surprise and asked why such a thing was in the ivory tower. The guy said that it is now known as the Tower of Magic, but was originally built for the purpose of observation. Asha asked why surprised. Kilts explained that this is all because the ivory tower mages still haven't found. At that moment there was silence in the room. Our heroine asked again what they hadn't found. Soon the guy said that they hadn't found Ingram. Asha, puzzled, asked what it was. As Kilts said, writers describe Ingram as having an unwavering spirit. Lyric scholars sometimes compare it to a curiosity about the taboo. And again, the girl asked what curiosity was. The boy explained that it was an attraction to the other side, a desire for the unknown. This is the taboo. No one knows the details, but it is impossible not to agree that everyone is drawn to where they want to return, so they gather in different places and just watch. They look at the sea over which that same golden bird once flew. At that moment, the door to Kilts's office opened. A small voice was heard. As it turned out, it was sleepy Prom who came to remind us that it was time to sleep. Our heroine left the room and immediately said goodbye to Kilts, wishing him good night. However, looking at the restless Kilts, the girl understood what he was thinking about then. She was sure beyond doubt that he missed the departed Ingram. The action moves to the bedroom. The girl takes out a book and suggests reading it together before bed. Prom sighed heavily and said that it was too late. Asha, however, asked to read just a little. And again, the guy sighed, but still agreed. He asked her to go to bed as soon as she read. The girl was happy, so she started reading right away. Long ago, on the other side of their world, there lived a huge dragon. The huge dragon was sleeping. He slept in the darkness for a very long time, but one day he opened his eyes and saw a bird with golden feathers. He had never met her before. It seemed as if the bird was watching him. She flapped her wings, spraying light, and Prom noticed at that moment that she was yawning and advised them to go to bed. After some time, he was hiding a girl who was surprised and asked the boy where he was from. Was it really from the north? However, the guy raised his hand and pointed to the window, whatever that meant. The action takes us to the next day. A new day, new lessons with Kilts, who was just telling Asha that she did something wrong. The girl looked at him embarrassedly, and he told her not to even pretend to cry. He asked if such a technique was in the book. The girl said that she was going to look, but she did not have time. She thought that the meaning would be clear. Kilts was puzzled and said that by that logic one could say that a normal egg is a manna stone egg. The girl sighed heavily and fell heavily onto the table. Kilts was usually kind to her. However, for some reason now he looks more like Mr. Kilts, the big demon king. She sighed and said that at first he told her that she deserved credit for anything she could do. Kilts said that was true, but he wanted to convey that with her skills she could easily do it. The girl slammed the table and screamed, saying that normal people can't learn a whole book in 3 days. Kilts sighed and asked for a pen. At that very moment, the boy began to scribble with a pen, and the girl sat frowning, thinking that Kilts had apparently forgotten that she was 10 years old. The guy soon handed her the piece of paper, and our heroine looked at it in surprise, saying that it looked as if Kilts had written it all over again. The teacher told her that if she didn't understand, she'd better read it and come back with a more rational formula. And he also asked her to classify and analyze 12 components of magic stones. Asha began to desperately pretend that she did not know. She couldn't understand how he remembered everything so well. In any case, she said she did the best she could. The guy said that this is the right answer, but the fundamental approach is ineffective. He asked to correct some part. Asha said that in that case, she wouldn't have time to look up the theory of magic and the 5 great elements. Pointing a finger at Kilts, he asked to start from here and see him in 2 hours. Soon, Kilts really did leave her and go about his business, and our heroine was left alone with her studies. Taking a sip of the tea that Prom brought, she realized that if it weren't for this wonderful drink, she would have already passed out. At this point, the girl decided to ask where Prom learned magic. She assumed that he learned magic from Kilts. However, he said that it was not so. The guy is not a natural-born magician at all. Asha was surprised that he helped her in the glass garden. Kilts replied that Pram himself is a living doll, so it is natural for him to have a connection with a similar doll. He used himself as a spellcasting machine, and she was the caster. A moment later, the girl screamed, perplexed that Prom was a doll. Kilts asked in surprise if she really didn't know. The girl said that this was the first time she had heard about this because no one had told her this news. Kilts said Pram moves like a person, he has emotions, he is well made, but at the end of the day, he is a machine. If Pram runs out of magic one day, he will probably die. Or rather, in the distant future, if his mana core breaks, then maybe. The girl stood up and said that even if it breaks, could it be restored by the power of Kilts? The guy shook his head and said that even he couldn't do that. That wasn't the kind of technology Astier was creating. That was the power of the other side of the world. Asha looked at the guy with even more interest and surprise, who noticed this look and said goodbye to her, saying that tomorrow they would call it a day. Our heroine sighed heavily and puffed out her cheeks, saying that he was incredibly picky. The guy was surprised at that moment and soon asked the girl what she said. Asha answered that she didn't say anything. A moment later, the boy started laughing uncontrollably. The girl didn't understand what was happening and what funny things she said. But still, when Kilts laughs, she is happy too, so the girl began to laugh with him. After a while, the action takes us to the dining room where Kilts was sitting with a wreath on his head. Trying to get rid of unnecessary questions, he said that Asha did it. Hazkan smiled and said that it suited him. Our heroine at this point said that she heard that today you need to give flowers to the teacher, and she also wove for Grandpa and for Pram. The girl gave everyone presents and said that they were all her friends, and she was glad to make them happy, considering that thanks to them she was happy too. Hazkan said that she had more friends recently. In any case, he asked if she wanted to go out into the world and make new friends. The girl sighed and said that maybe she would like to, and she would also like to go to school. All her glances inadvertently went in the direction of Kilts. However, the guy couldn't think of anything better to do than turn around. What a cheeky guy. The man sighed and said that if Asha couldn't be sent to school, he would tell her about the times when he was a teacher. Asha happily asked if he would really do that for her, and Kilts instantly turned to the old man. Their eyes met each other. So in the royal family, he was 100 times weaker than now. He even thought that if he hurt Kilts, he would not bleed. Kilts asked in confusion what times he was talking about. Asha laughed and suggested that he was even stricter. Then Hazkan laughed and said that many people even bet on making him laugh. Asha assumed that if he was of noble blood, then so was his grandfather. The man in turn said that he had never received status or anything like that. In that case, our heroine wanted to know how they met. At that moment, a dead silence fell over the table again. Our heroine asked, confused, what had happened. Had she asked the wrong question? Kilts sighed and said that Hazkan worked as a courtier for the Caldron's family. Our heroine asked how that was possible. Could it be that even if he was not of royal blood, he could? Hazkan explained that the nobility needed helpers. Even if this guy was not from the royal family, he was entrusted with the title of a mage. Asha said that she understood but did not understand why nobles were noble. Kilts replied that there was no reason for that anymore. People are creatures that cannot live without social stratification. Astiers also talk about equality, but in reality, class divisions prevail in society. How could anyone even think of using Egeron shards? Our heroine asked what it was. Hazkan said that the little one had been asking a lot of questions lately. Then he told Kilts that if he brought it up, he should explain. Grandfather explained that if he started telling the story, it would take a long time. Our heroine smiled and said that she wanted to listen. Scratching his head, the man said he could make an exception for her. And so this was 50 years ago when magic was a mystery. Very few people knew how to use it because no one knew what magic was. But then someone broke into the Great Palace in Egeron Tabu. The place that served as a refuge was hidden. Our heroine said that she had heard that dragons guarded the innermost part of the Great Palace. Hazkan said that there were such rumors, but still they were sure of only one thing. They came out of the heart of the Great Palace with a huge treasure. It was the Egeron shard. This thing allowed ordinary people to feel what magic was. With this fragment, the cities in the center were united into Astier. Even now, they supply various goods to the citizens and raise taxes. Because of this, he quarreled with Caldrogan. The girl asked why this happened. The old man replied that it was because the central regions had united into the largest country on the continent. Because of this, the great kings of Astier became more arrogant. What was it called? The name they liked to call themselves. Kilts suddenly said that stealing and using power that was not given at birth is the self-proclamation of a mysterious conqueror. However, our heroine looked at him and suggested that it was better when many people knew magic. Again in Asha's face he saw rose, so for a moment he even lost his sense of weight. Hazkan turned to him and advised him to finish eating quickly because he needed to grow. At that moment, the guy stood up and told them to finish eating without him and he would go. Our heroine was surprised that he stood up so abruptly and decided to run away. In any case, after some time, she had a whole bunch of documents in her hands. Haskan looked at this in bewilderment and said that he would still show Kilts how to give children work. The man started supporting the little girl, saying that he was on her side. He wished her luck and sent her to talk to Kilts. Meanwhile, the guy was alone in his room with his thoughts. The girl had a great idea in an instant, so she started sneaking up on him. A few seconds later, she pounced on Kilts with joyful cries because she wanted to scare him. However, the boy did not react at all. He turned his head in surprise and looked at the girl. Asha asked in surprise if he hadn't expected this turn of events. Kilts nodded and said that it was very unexpected. But these words didn't inspire much confidence, so the girl said that she didn't think so, and still Kilts took her in his arms, saying that he was surprised. At that moment, the girl looked at what he was reading and asked in surprise if this was really the story of a huge dragon and a golden bird. The girl happily said that she liked her very much. Kilts was surprised, so he asked if it was true. Our heroine said it was true. Now she can read everything, so the huge dragon decided to follow the golden bird. The huge dragon, having awakened, flew in the footsteps of the golden bird from the other side of the world, but the dragon, having lost its strength, was crushed on its way. The giant was on the verge of death, but finally he saw the golden bird Ingram flying by. After this, the huge dragon watched the starry sky with a sense of pride. Our heroine was glad that the story ended well. At that moment, Kilts, with a smile on his face, said that she no longer makes mistakes. The girl proudly said that she had read it more than once. Kilts then asked, "What about the theory of magic and the 5 great elements?" At that moment, Asha's face changed. The magician laughed and told her that it was too late today, so she would finish reading tomorrow. At this moment, Kilts's face was calm, and one could even say happy. Of course, our heroine noticed this and decided to ask him what he was thinking about. The guy, without thinking twice, said what he thought he would ask her for tomorrow. Asha, angry as a bear, stomped off to her room, saying that it was unfair. Soon, the girl left the room and wished Kilts good night. Of course, the guy wished her good night back. Our heroine ran down the hallway to her room to have a little talk with Pram, but she stopped suddenly, realizing that she needed to take a couple of books with her. Entering the room, she took the books she wanted and then wondered, where did Kilts go? At that very moment, she heard a strange noise coming from another room. Without thinking twice, the girl followed closer to find out what was going on. In the room, she saw Kilts, who was sitting on his knees looking at the moonlit sky and muttering something. Our heroine also heard that he was crying. She really wanted him not to cry. She could help him wipe away his tears, but she understood that he simply would not allow this to happen, so the girl turned around and went to her room. The action takes place the next day. Our heroine burst into Kilts's room early in the morning and began to wake him up. She came here because the cleaning fairy, aka Pram, asked her to take the box to Kilts's room. The girl assumed that he was somewhere here. At that moment, our heroine turned her head and noticed the wreath she was giving him. She immediately ran up to him because she was very happy to see that he had kept the wreath, which was 6 months old. She noticed another little thing in the same way. It was a bouquet that Our heroine remembered that she had collected this bouquet for her dad, and on the fateful day of their meeting, she had lost it out of fear. Looking at this bouquet, she couldn't understand why he kept it, and was there magic on them? Anyway, the action shifts to the evening. Our heroes were sitting on the porch and eating cake. At that moment, Asha turned to Pram. She said that someone picked up what she lost and took it, but in the end did not tell about it. Why did he do that? Pram suggested that it was so important to him that he didn't want to give it back. Our heroine looked at the sky in surprise and said that if it wasn't that important, then everything was fine. After a while, the gates opened, which meant that Kilts was finally back. Our heroine ran to him, asking where he had been. The guy smiled and said that he wanted to give her something. Soon after these words, he handed her a wrapped thing along with some note. The girl was very surprised, so she decided to unpack it right away. As it turned out, it was a letter, and it read, "To my brilliant student Asha Konak, with the hope that the path of adventure she will take in the future will be a journey." At that moment, Kilts said that it would soon be a year since she came to this house. Our heroine immediately began to happily unpack the next gift. As soon as she opened it, to her surprise, she discovered that it was a robe. Kilts suddenly said that he had first thought about clothes or toys, but then remembered that in Ivory Castle there is a custom of receiving robes woven with magic. In any case, he reminded her that she would get a dress robe when she became an adult, but she could try this one on Also, if she didn't like it, she didn't have to wear it. The girl was shocked that he dared to say such words. She hugged Kilts' gift and said that she would wear it. It was at this same moment that she noticed that a strange bow had fallen out of her robe. Taking it in his hands, Kilts said that he thought her hair had grown a lot, so she would need it. The girl turned her head, and holding out a bow, asked to tie her hair. Of course he was very surprised by this request because he had no previous experience in this matter. After some time of the wizard's efforts, our heroine asked him how things were with her hair, to which the guy said that it was just a nightmare. However, he apologized because it was not her fault but his skills. At that moment, our heroine looked at herself. Asha was so surprised that Kilts was expecting the worst, but the girl asked if there was anything he couldn't handle. Thus, history began to flow of its own accord, and soon 6 whole years had passed. Asha was 17 years old at the time, and right now she and Prom have returned home with groceries. Hazkan was sitting on a rocking chair and was surprised that the boys had come so early. Asha told him that she had bought something that Grandpa would like. Holding out the bag, she said that these were pickled chestnuts, and also Hazkan interrupted the girl at this point. The man asked in confusion who the person was with them. The girl said she didn't understand who he was talking about, to which he replied that they were being followed. Our heroine at that moment remembered that her grandfather could see other people's memories. Prom suddenly said that nothing happened and they just left. Asha also smiled and said that it was a secret for Kilts. At that very moment, by coincidence, he also came out onto the street and immediately asked what they were talking about. The girl was horrified to realize that if she was caught, she would be forbidden to go out. So with the same smile, she said that it was a joke. There were no secrets. At that moment, the gates swung open, and soon a joyful voice was heard saying that he thought he would die before he found this place. There was an unknown guy standing at the door whom our heroine, of course, did not know. The first question she asked herself was who the hell he was and how he found them. Kilts in turn whispered the guy's name, Eurus. The boy shouted joyfully and told the master that everything was right. It was really him. His favorite student had returned. He started running happily and saying that he had been wandering for a long time, so this trick was interesting as expected from a teacher. By the way, didn't he miss you? However, Kilts surprisedly told the guy that he didn't remember having a student like him. The guy, perplexed, said that he was very angry. Our heroine looked at Kilts in surprise, who in turn asked the guy in surprise how he got here. Hadn't he been to Astier? Eurus began to tell a whole incredible story about his adventures. Kilts understood only the first few words of this, so he asked to be brief. Eurus turned his head and said that he was coming here for this lady. Of course, his gaze fell on Asha. At that moment, Kilts turned around and said that he understood the situation. He could stay and do whatever he wanted. Eurus asked in confusion if the teacher would not ask why this was necessary. Kilts turned around and said he was going to say no anyway. Was that really what he wanted to hear? The boy immediately sank, and Hazkan smiled and said that since things were like that, he might as well at least eat before leaving. With tears in his eyes, the boy began to nod his head and thank the old man. Soon the boy happily approached Hazkan and asked if this was number 16. The old man introduced himself and asked if the boy really wanted to be thrown out. Eurus said that he had no idea that he was a teacher too. He didn't even recognize him. When this happens, he realizes that a lot of time has passed. Hazkan, however, told the boy that his face had not changed. He was still disgusting. Eurus laughed, saying that Aragon's relics were of great use. It was a slave contract in exchange for the position of Professor Franger. But in any case, wasn't this the body that swore to follow the path of magic? Our heroine was in shock at this moment. At that moment, she remembered that as a child, she dated a guy who was going to enroll in Franger. Asha looked at the guy in confusion and asked if he was really a professor at Franger. The guy turned around and said yes, he's the head of magical biology at Franger. His name is Martin Eurus. Soon the action moves to the table. Our heroine excitedly asked if he really studied in Ivory Tower with Kilts. Eurus laughed and said that it was not so. He was his assistant when he was the court magician of Caldrogen. He was 21 at the time. He wasn't particularly competent. Asha was surprised because he looked quite young at the time. She asked how long ago it had been. The boy told her that at that time he was just a stone manna egg that couldn't even create the correct formulas. Haskan explained the boy's incomprehensible words by saying that a stone egg is an idiom among magicians that means young. It was once invented by magicians with a bad character. Our heroine smiled and said she understood and then asked how old Kilts was. The guy laughed and said that neither Professor Kilts nor he looked their age. Asha then assumed that it was a secret. Eurus took up his food and told the girl that she was quite sharp and, by the way, more mature than the students at Franger. The girl immediately asked if he could tell her about Franger. She had once read that they did not recognize the great elements. Was that true? Eurus replied that it was rather the Astyr mages who did not acknowledge the existence of the fifth element Asha, however said that the fifth element was the caster himself. How could it not exist? The professor smiled and asked the lady if she knew about the Aragon artifacts. This is a huge magical resource found 50 years ago. Magic in Astyr works through banners and wands with these artifacts. In essence, the artifact is considered the caster, not the person. Asha suggested that for Astyrs, magic was a blessing. The boy said that few people were born with innate powers, and magic had previously been used only by a select few. In their days of Astyr, magic can be used by anyone regardless of their origin. Haskan suddenly said that they get along well with each other. Eurus laughed and said that there was a lot to learn from them. Asha suddenly asked in surprise if Kilts was really that amazing. The professor said it was an absolute fact. He was the last legend of Ivory Tower and a descendant of the Grey Pilgrim. All the mages in Astyr put together would be no match for him. The guy also said that his lessons are notoriously difficult to understand. He can only imagine how much she must be suffering. Asha laughed and said that it was true at first, but now everything is fine. They are not so complicated that they suffer. At that moment, there was silence. Soon the boy jumped up, starting to tell the teacher that it was unfair. Why couldn't he be as calm when he taught him? In response to these words, the voice of Kilts followed, saying that he could always start teaching him again. The guy said he would be happy to repeat any material he wanted. Eurus even shuddered. He said everything was fine, and it seemed he had overreacted with his words. However, he again began to try to say something, but Kilts interrupted him and said, "No." Eurus, perplexed, said that he had not even listened to him. The guy said that Astyr was looking for skilled mages, regardless of background or status. Kilts said that they had heard rumors too, so he knew. Haskan, at this point, asked in surprise if it was true that Astyr was planning a war or something like that. Eurus, however, said that it was a secret. Soon after, the guy turned his gaze to Asha, who sat and did not know what to do. At that very moment, the guy happily asked if he was right in knowing that she would be 17 this year. Eurus immediately said that the new semester was starting very soon, so it was the perfect time, and there might be a free place among the graduates. The guy said he could even write a recommendation. A student of Master Kilts would be more qualified than others. The girl started to say that she would like to, but for obvious reasons, Kilts interrupted her and said that he definitely said no. Our heroine immediately asked in bewilderment why she couldn't go. The guy in turn turned around and went the other way, saying that this was the end of the conversation. Soon the action moves outside. Kilts stood in the middle of the path, looking into the distance, and Asha ran behind him. Our heroine came up and said that she wanted to enroll in Franger, so she wanted to hear consent. The guy at that point said that all they teach there is practical knowledge on how to serve the nobility. Is that really what she wants to learn? The girl said that she wanted to see Aragon artifacts and learn more about Astyr magic. Kilts replied that if that was her ultimate goal, he could show her and teach her all of that right now. Their magic is nothing more than a childish imitation that depends on artifacts. It is not real magic. If she wants to leave, she must give a more worthy reason. Our heroine reproached him for the fact that reading about things is not the same as actually experiencing them. He taught her this himself. Kilts said that the world is cruel. There may be people who look down on her just because of her birth. Asha replied that he does not know what will happen in the future. However, he said that he speaks from experience. Asha still said that even if it is so, she does not mind. In turn, the magician turned around and said that he was the one who was against it. He didn't want her to be hurt. Our heroine responded to his words by saying that even if it hurts her, it certainly won't affect him. It's not connected in any way. However, the expression on Kilts' face spoke for itself. The girl realized that she shouldn't expect understanding from him. Soon she turned around and ran home with tears in her eyes. She didn't understand how long he would treat her like a little child. After a while, the action takes us home, or more precisely to Kilts' office. At the entrance sat Hazkan, who was telling the guy to let her go. He himself knows how much she wants it. Kilts nevertheless said that someone there might recognize her. For example, Dean Hazkan responded to this by saying that Astier had not cared about Kaldrogan for a long time. Of course there is Kaisor, but this man is obsessed with any strange. At this point, Kilts said that he does not care about Kaisor. He does not want her to know all this. However, the old man told the boy that he should put his ego aside. What would happen if she found out? He couldn't keep her in the dark forever. Hazkan also said that he sees her looking at the school every time she goes into town. At that moment, Kilts sighed and looking out the window said that if she went to Astier, he would not see her. In that case, the old man said that he should go with her if that was all he cared about. He would be an eternal teacher. Kilts replied that staying here was the best option. Of course, in any case, it is better than being with an alcoholic father, but this place is not paradise either. The world is full of dark things that are better left unknown. He wants her to see only beauty and hear only kind words. Standing up from his seat, the guy shouted that he would not allow the same mistake to happen again. However, at that moment, there was silence in the room, after which Hazkan said that he was crazy. Kilts changed in an instant. He asked what it meant. The old man replied that he sometimes forgot that Asha was a living person. Hazkan said that she is not a pet, tasty food, and pretty toys will not help to keep her in place. However, Kilts slammed the table and told Hazkan Yuzik to stop lecturing him. Nothing would make him change his mind. Soon Hazkan decided to change the subject. Bowing his head, the old man looked at the floor, saying that Eurus had called him the 16th. Kilts' face instantly changed from anger to shock. He certainly wasn't ready to hear those words. The man in turn said that he was too old to remember that 10-year dispute. However, they both know that Kilts is still with him for a long time, and that should not be forgotten. Kilts asked in surprise what he can do now. Even if he kills him, the past cannot be changed. In this case, the old man suggested sending the girl to school, and then their accounts will be over. An old man who is about to die a living corpse stuck in time, a doll that can break at any moment. Turning around, Hazkan told the wizard that the girl could not be allowed to rot with such trash. Even before closing the door, he said that life was too valuable for this. Soon, the action takes us to the next day. Our heroine stood in front of Eurus. The guy smiled happily at that moment and told her that they would see each other in Franger. Our heroine was surprised that he was coming back. He had come all the way here. What about his hometown? The guy said that he had left his seal for a letter of recommendation. By the way, even if he came home now, there was no one at home that he knew. In any case, he wished him luck and said that they would see each other in a week. The girl smiled and watched him go, thanking him for calling her. Immediately after the guy left the area, the girl turned around and decided that it was time for her to get ready too. At that moment, Asha raised her head and noticed that Kilts was watching her. She decided that even if they had quarreled, she couldn't ignore him completely. She raised her hand to greet him, but without even having time to say a word, Kilts simply turned around and closed the curtain behind him. Our heroine immediately began to think about different things. Was he really disappointed in her because of her persistence? However, he himself should know that he is not a talkative person, so why is he so stubborn? One way or another, she began to climb the stairs. Kilts came out of the room in front of her face, also surprised to see them here. The girl, however, walked past him silently and with a stony face, thinking that she too might be angry with him. But she still decided to stop and look back, and at that moment she saw Kilts' face. Asha sped up even more and ran into her room and wondered why did he look at her like that. His face was incredibly sad, but she couldn't understand why he was like that. In any case, the action is postponed for a week. Pram helped the girl get ready, gave her socks, other things, and even a pillow. Asha laughed and said that it would not fit in the suitcase. However, the guy said in surprise that she would not be able to sleep without this pillow. And immediately, with tears in her eyes, she ran to Pram, saying that she would miss him. The guy sighed and said that he did too. Moreover, he would also really like to go with her. Asha asked what Grandpa and Kilts would do without him, to which he replied that they could handle it themselves. A puzzled Hazkan asked if he really wanted to dump everything on the old man. In any case, the old man also said that he would feel better if she did not go alone. Our heroine asked in bewilderment if he was really going there too. One way or another, after some time the suitcase was packed, which meant it was time to go. Soon the action takes us outside. It was time to say goodbye, so they went out to wish the girl good luck. Prom hugged Asha and asked her to take care of herself. The girl smiled and asked if she understood correctly as usual. After this, the girl ran to Hazkan saying that there was no need for any sentimentality. Hugging him, she thanked him for everything. Hazkan at that moment asked her not to let stupid children belittle her, and she should also study well. In any case, he decided that she knew all this herself. Asha nodded her head, saying that she had the best teacher. Just then, footsteps were heard. Of course, it was Kilts who came out to say goodbye to her, but decided not to send her away empty-handed. The guy said it was a magic box that sent letters. In Franger, all letters are checked, so if she wants to write to him, she just needs to put the letter inside. By the way, our heroine seems to have seen something similar in his office. In any case, she said that it was a very unusual artifact, and she was curious where it came from. Kilts said he made it himself, and she doesn't have to worry about being caught, since it has protective spells. Asha guessed that Franger might raise questions. Kilts, however, said that this was not the case at all. In this case, the girl asked in surprise if this was not against the rules. Hearing no answer, Kilts simply said he would walk her to Brillant. Within minutes, they were on their way. Asha didn't understand if this was an attempt at reconciliation. Suddenly he turned to the girl saying he didn't know if she remembered something. The girl asked what happened, and the boy said that he once said that he didn't want her to know about the outside world. He admitted that even now he does not want to let her go, and does so with great force. If he had his way, he would lock her in the house and never let her out. His expression was tense. The guy also added that if his hands weren't tied, he would have done it. Our heroine's face left much to be desired after these words. The girl recalled that he also told her that he would give her everything she wanted. She explained that she wanted to go to school, make friends, and learn Astir magic. There are so many things she wants to learn. Kilts did say, however, that she would soon realize that things were not as she had imagined. It would be better for her not to know about some things at all. In any case, he asked why she wanted it so much. In response, Asha asked if he remembered the words about what awaited her. She recalled his letter, which said that the path of adventure she would take in the future would be a journey filled with wonderful things. He wrote it to her himself. The world is so big and full of mysteries, and she wants to solve them all herself. That's why she asked to let her go. Kilts sighed heavily and said that the last word always remains with her. Asha laughed and said that no teacher can defeat their student. Kilts asked in surprise who said that it was the first time he heard it. The girl laughed and said that she was the one saying that and that she had just made it up. Kilts smiled back and said that he would agree to let her go on one condition. Asha asked what the condition would be, to which the guy asked not to mention him at the academy, and not because she was his student. The girl assumed that he wanted to keep his secret. Kilts nodded and said that he was glad she understood that. Asha took his hands and said that she would come back as soon as the semester was over and would write a lot. Kilts replied that he would wait for her letters. After some time, the action moves to the city. Eurus met the guys, so our heroine said goodbye to Kilts. Finally, Kilts smiled and said that he wished her luck and a safe journey. A few minutes later, they were at the station. Seeing all these structures and trains, Asha asked in surprise if this was really the station. She said it all looked more like a palace. Eurus also said she would be even more surprised to learn that these paths are not finished yet. He explained that they were now only reaching the borders of Astir and that next year work would be completed on laying out routes to eastern Nurmaz through the Great Meadows. Our heroine was surprised because these meadows are very huge. Asha decided to ask why they were laying these paths. Eurus replied that it is the efficient transportation of goods that is the basis of prosperity. After some time, our heroine was inside the train. Entering, the professor asked the girl to sit down because the train could start moving soon. At this point, the girl asked what Filion was because she had heard the word on the street. The guy explained that Astir is an address to a young unmarried girl. For example, she would be Filion Konak. In turn, the address to a man is Firi Man. Asha asked if she understood correctly that she should address him as Firiman Eurus, to which he replied that he was too old for that. It was better to just call him Professor Eurus. By the way, he suddenly said that he knew how inappropriate it was to talk about a lady's appearance, but she looked very much like her. Did the teacher mention anyone by chance? Asha said that it was. She looked like a person he knew. Yuris said that he was only saying this because the teacher was not here now. He followed her because he was surprised when he saw her. It's no understatement to say that she looks exactly like that girl. Our heroine was certainly surprised that even he knew about this girl. Yuris suddenly laughed and suggested that Kilts had used the word acquaintance instead of any name. The girl nodded her head and said that it was Yuris thought about it, saying that he didn't think that was the right word to describe her. Their relationship was on a slightly different level, something like... At that moment, Yuris noticed how attentively the girl was listening to him. The guy immediately started waving his hand, saying that he would probably stop there because Teacher Kilts could behead him. Asha assumed that this girl had some connection to the royal court. Maybe she worked there? Yuris asked in surprise how she came to this conclusion. The girl said that she felt like Kilts had worked at the royal court when they were close. The professor smiled and told her that she would do well at the academy. At this point, he also suggested that she take a rest, since they still had a very long drive ahead of them. Soon the girl took a book out of her bag and said that she would read it. Yuris looked at it and said that the story took on a new light after studying magic. He used to read it all the time when he was a kid too. Asha asked in surprise why this was so. The professor was very surprised and asked if she really didn't know. So it is said that this tale is actually about the history of the mages in the north, where dragons are still worshipped. The mages are called the heirs of the dragon's blood. Yuris explained that this is why some people think that this story and the mages are connected. It also has to do with the founding of Caldrogen. 1,000 years ago, before the current kingdoms emerged on the continent, the first mage appeared. Asha assumed it was the Grey Pilgrim, the forefather of the Ivory Tower. And that was true, but for the ancient times he was considered an outcast. He wandered the continent avoiding everyone. Then he met someone from the Caldrance line, the ancestor of the royal family of Caldrogen. They eventually made a pact with each other and eventually became friends. The mage helped found the kingdom of Caldrogen. The girl asked why the Grey Pilgrim chose Caldrance. There were many theories, but some say that the first Caldrance was named Ingram, like the golden bird. Anyway, the professor said that after Ingram conquered the north with the help of the magician, he gave him something as payment for the contract. Asha, of course, wanted to know what it was, so she asked what he gave him. The boy replied that he had given him passage to the Starry Sea. The girl sighed and asked if he really meant the ending of the book. The professor said it was true. They say all magicians are doomed to yearn for him. The place of Ingram's flight is the end of the Eastern Sea. The girl said she didn't understand. What exactly was supposed to be in this passage? Yuri said no one knew. This part wasn't part of the legend. In any case, he said that the mage, having thanked Caldrance, went to the Starry Sea. The king missed his dear friend so much that he built an observatory tower on the Cape of Futility. Asha finished with amazement, saying that this became the Ivory Tower. Yuris looked out the window and said that all this is speculation. There is no evidence for this. Such legends inevitably become distorted over time. After some time, the guys were on their way, and Yuris was sleeping soundly in the meantime. At that moment, our heroine felt mana, and also realized that this is Astier. She feels a strong spell. In any case, she understood that she would now study here, although she couldn't believe it. Looking out the window, the girl suddenly remembered that she had once had a similar conversation with Kilts. What did he say then? Sighing, she realized that no matter how hard she tried to remember it, she simply couldn't. Soon after, the girl, following Professor Yuris's example, fell asleep, and the train continued to carry them to the city. Meanwhile, in the bright sky above this train, a golden bird was flying, watching them. After a while, the action takes us to Estier. Our heroine was told that they were there, so she immediately looked out of the window. The girl was pleasantly surprised, and one could say that she was in shock because the beautiful Franger was opening up before her. Yuris looked out in exactly the same way and said that this used to be the old monastery of Caldrogen. It's shaped like a building in the north, but the white exterior is so beautiful. They love this color here. By the way, she will see Astier-style architecture everywhere, even in places of restoration. Asha was shocked by the size of the school. She asked if all of them were classrooms. Yuris laughed and said that some of them were rooms for official meetings and ceremonies. Soon, the boys got off the train and were heading towards the Franger gate. At that moment, someone came out from inside. Looking at the girls, Asha asked if this was the school uniform. Eurus nodded and said that he just remembered that she needed one too. Anyway, to start with, he suggested that we go to his office. Our heroine was in anticipation. She couldn't wait to get her own uniform. In a moment, they were inside Eurus's office. The man asked them to make themselves at home, and he would go and make them some tea. Soon after taking the cup, the girl said that she thought that all magicians were dirty, but his office looked neat, although she only knows one magician and his office. Eurus asked in surprise who it was, and Asha said that she was talking about Kilts. His office is so dirty that it is hard to find a pen there. The professor was of course surprised by this. The boy asked how this could be possible. Wasn't the teacher obsessed with cleanliness? Asha laughed and asked again in bewilderment. Eurus supposed that he might have softened with age. In any case, he gave her all the papers and advised her to go to the hostel to register, and Mrs. Ruth would take care of everything. Our heroine was incredibly happy. She is a student at Franger. Her dream came true. After some time at the registration point, the girl said that these documents were not enough for admission to the hostel. This girl was Miss Ruth, who was the director of the girls' dormitory. The girl suddenly looked at the student and asked her name. Asha introduced herself, but did not understand why the director was asking her about it. Looking at the paper and soon at the girl, she asked who her guardian was. Asha smiled and said that Professor Martin Eurus was her guardian while she was here. Miss Ruth then said that as far as she knew, Professor Eurus was on vacation. Asha said that was true, but he had returned to help her. The woman immediately asked if there were documents about guardianship. Our heroine was in a panic in her head because the professor didn't say that anything else was needed. She said that the professor gave her all the necessary documents. Putting her hand on the documents, Ms. Ruth said that this would call all her documentation into question, so she could not allow her to register yet. Our heroine asked in surprise what she should do. Ruth replied that she had to provide documents confirming representation. Asha was even more panicked because Kilts was home now. Should she go back to get this document? At that moment, a guy with red hair opened the door to the director's office and immediately said in surprise that he didn't know that Miss Ruth had a visitor. Anyway, he came in and asked what was wrong. Our heroine said that Miss Ruth had said she needed a guardianship certificate, but she didn't have one. The guy asked again, to which the girl said that the student had not provided all the necessary documents. This is a common mistake. The guy asked to see the documents, so Asha Konak from Kalinzia. Her guardian is Professor Eurus. According to the order, she is enrolled in a special process. He was surprised that she had special clearance and soon said that he did not see any problems. However, the director said that any person who has a guardian instead of their representative must provide identification documents. The guy, perplexed, began to say that if she had a guardian, then the representative simply could not come. Newspapers from Kalinzia even take 3 weeks to get here. He asked if Miss Ruth really wanted the girl to sleep outside. He asked her to be gentle with her. The principal still mentioned the rules. The guy smiled and said that he had brought the very book she had asked for, so the matter was settled. They could go and Miss Ruth would take care of everything. Asha thanked him. After some time, the guys were already on the street. The girl shyly thanked the guy for his help. He told her that Miss Ruth was simply unbearable. He had never heard of anyone being asked for any kind of guardianship certificate. Asha didn't understand why she did it because they even met for the first time. The guy said that he himself had no idea. Maybe this is what it means to be an old lady. The girl wondered why this happened, and at that moment the guy asked if she remembered him. Our heroine looked at him and really noticed that this was the same boy she saw in childhood. She said with surprise about Arundel Lake Mountain Pearl Inn. The guy smiled and said that everything was right. By the way, he couldn't even imagine that they would meet again. The guy also introduced himself. His name is Linzio. Asha, however, said she was surprised he remembered her since it was so long ago. The guy said they still talk about what happened that day, especially his mother. That magician made a great impression on her. After that, he asked if that magician was alive. Our heroine began to say his name, and a moment later she laughed nervously, saying that her teacher was fine. After that, the guy said that special clearances are quite rare. She is probably the first in the history of Franger who got it for the graduating class. Asha said that Professor Eurus knew her teacher, and when she said she was interested in Franger, he wrote a recommendation. Linzio asked in confusion if she was talking about the weird guy in charge of magical biology. Asha asked why he was weird, and the guy asked her not to let him fool her. The girl, by the way, said that she doesn't know much about him, only that he is an old acquaintance of her teacher. Lincio said that he can become a little nervous during practice. By the way, at that moment, the guy assumed that if she was here on his recommendation, then that meant she was a commoner? Asha was surprised by the question and said that it was true. She soon wondered if she should have said it at all. She remembered how Kilts always spoke ill of the stupid aristocrats. Asha asked Lincio if he wanted her to start calling him Sir. The boy laughed in bewilderment, saying that they were only nobles because of their grandfather. He had received the title several decades ago. There was no need to treat him any differently. Our heroine smiled and looked at him and said that this was even good. At this point, Lincio asked if he could introduce her to his friend. He was probably in his dorm. Asha, of course, agreed. Our heroine was, of course, only happy to make new friends. True, this was so until one situation occurred. The boys shouted in confusion, saying that Mr. Dominon was coming, so they told Asha to crawl under the bed. Once inside, she tried to understand how it had come to this. The girl thought she was doing something wrong, and in the meantime, Mr. Dominon was telling Lincio that he had never learned to clean up after himself. The boy scratched his head and apologized. The man nevertheless told Lincio Kaisor that he was dissatisfied with his behavior. Our heroine, as soon as she heard the guy's last name, was incredibly surprised. What does Kaisor mean? Mr. Dominon realized that it was he, the scoundrel, who had caused this commotion in the girls' dormitory. He advised him to be careful because he was watching them. Shortly after, Lincio approached the girl and extended his hand to her, telling her that she could climb out. However, our heroine was still shocked that it was Lincio Kaisor. At this point, Lincio's friend Mahiran Rochestinen asked Lincio if he had given his books to Mrs. Ruth. The guy asked him to listen. He asked Mahiran if he knew how he was caught in the girls' hostel. He had made a deal with Miss Ruth to keep quiet about the book, so he had to give her the book so that she would not tell his parents. Mahiran, puzzled, asked if he knew how rare the book was. Lincio said he knew it was only printed in Caldrogan, but luckily he had a close friend from the north. He was surprised to have a KO. Mahiran covered his friend's mouth with his hand. The boy sighed in confusion and asked to forgive Lincio. He may seem like a frivolous fool and a thief, but he is actually good. Lincio asked to stop throwing mud at him right in front of Asha. The guy coughed and suggested to leave here. Asha asked in surprise where they were going. He looked at her in surprise and said that they would go to her dorm. However, the girl reminded him of Mrs. Ruth's words. And Lincio, in turn, reminded her that he gave her the book, so everything was settled. Mahiran, perplexed, asked his friend if he could at least look guilty. Shortly after, our heroine was lying on her bed in her room. Luckily, Lincio's words were indeed enough. She was just thinking about him. It turns out that he is a relative of Count Kaisor, whom they met at the lake. Our heroine recently asked him what they were doing there, to which the guy said that they went to Arendon to relax. Our heroine suddenly asked if his grandfather had gone with him. The guy said yes, and also that he had been injured during the trip and was still bedridden. Lincio said it wasn't fatal, but it was very painful for him. That's why his parents make him visit every vacation. Our heroine knew for sure that she should not have mentioned Kilts' name at all. At that very moment, she wondered if she should tell Kilts about it. However, she assumed that if he found out it would be very bad. In that case, it would be better to keep everything a secret. Soon, our heroine opened the window thinking that Lincio himself was a good person. So new place, new friends, learning new things. This trip should be great. Already in the evening, she was writing a letter for her dear teacher, Kilts Iskadian. Although she did not think that it would be easy, it turned out to be more difficult to get used to. The girl said that much of what he taught her is different in this place. She encounters surprises both in and out of the classroom. And yet the letter came out strange, so she decided to rewrite it. Franger is beautiful in autumn, wherever you look. She feels well, the lectures are interesting, the students are friendly. Soon the girl clutched her head, thinking that all this was a blatant lie. The activities are postponed a week earlier, or to be precise, on the first day of classes. Our heroine, entering the auditorium, realized that there was not a single familiar face around her. However, at that moment, the girl was called to them by Lincio and Mahiran, who waved to her in a friendly manner. Our heroine was incredibly happy that she was in the same class with them. At that moment, the door opened and everyone had to take their seats. The teacher assumed that none of the students had studied during the holidays. He decided that he would need to refresh his memory and start with the fact that they would make the mana stone glow. They had to split into pairs and compare the brightness of the stones and also show the result. Our heroine realized that this was a very big problem because she didn't know anyone here. It's obvious that she didn't know who to partner with and the people she knows are already taken. Suddenly, a guy approached Asha and assumed that she didn't have a partner, so he suggested that they team up. Our heroine was of course only glad about this, because otherwise she would have been very embarrassed. The guy, looking at her in surprise, said that he had not seen her here before Asha Konak introduced herself, and said that she had recently transferred to the graduating class. The classmate nodded and said he understood, but he did not introduce himself. Asha was surprised by this, and the teacher just brought the mana stone. Our heroine, taking the stone in her hands, realized that it was exactly like the stone she used when Kilts first taught her. The girl happily began to use her magic to light the stone on fire. The light from the stone was so bright that rays of light flew out of the windows and flew further. All the students stared at Asha in horror, but as soon as she opened her eyes, she couldn't understand why everyone was looking at her. At that very moment, the girl realized what had just happened. The action takes us back a little further. Eurus gave the girl an emblem and a wand that belonged to a student who left the academy. The professor said she would use them every day. She should use the rest of the time to get acquainted. The girl asked if she could use magic without a wand. Eurus strongly advised her not to do this because the Astirs are not friendly with northern mages, that is, hereditary mages. Our heroine at this moment realized that she had completely forgotten about the professor's words and therefore put herself at risk. All the students started whispering, assuming she was from the north. They immediately realized that she was the same student who had transferred. The kids didn't understand what she had forgotten in her senior year. Others said they had heard about special access. In any case, right now Asha was the main target for discussion. At that moment, our heroine was screaming in her head, telling herself that she was a real stone mana egg. After some time, all the students, of course, avoided her, which our heroine was very disappointed about. However, at that moment, a guy approached her who wanted to talk to her. As it turned out, Linzio approached her and asked in surprise if she was really a hereditary magician. The girl said she wasn't trying to hide it from him or anything like that, but the guy's face instantly changed, saying that it was simply amazing. By the way, her teacher also used magic without a wand. Asha smiled and said that she never used a wand at home and forgot that it was not usually done that way. Our heroine suddenly asked Mahiran why he was so surprised. He was from the north too, wasn't he? The guy said that was true, but a hereditary mage remained a rarity. Linzio immediately said that if your fellow northerner was so surprised, then it was not at all strange that everyone else was in shock. He asked her to ignore them. Our heroine, of course, tried to think so, but in any case, now everyone avoids her. But luckily, she had Linzio and Maharan. She wouldn't know what she would have done without them. In that case, the girl took up her pen thinking that she could write more about these two. How are you doing, Kilts? I have already made 2 new friends here. Linzio is smart and funny and never treats me any differently than others, for which she is very grateful. Mahiran is a nobleman from Kaldrogen. He came all the way to Astier to study. He is always polite and formal and resembles a fairy tale prince. They are both very good friends. I am doing well, so please pass on my best wishes to Pram and Grandpa. Sincerely yours, Student Asha Konak. The girl placed her letter in the Kilts artifact. After some time of training, our heroine finally got her uniform. Now she felt like a part of this academy. However, the girl still forgot where the library was. She needed to remember it quickly. At that moment, she started to walk past the guys who were actively talking about something. Suddenly, one of them noticed Asha and asked the others to take a look. Eventually, their eyes met. Asha clearly remembered that these guys were from her class, but she didn't understand why they stopped talking and why everyone was staring at her. Our heroine decided that the best solution would be to simply walk and as quickly as possible. However, one of the hooligans tripped her, causing the girl to trip and almost fall. With great difficulty, she managed to stay on her feet and immediately asked what had just happened. The guy said in surprise that it was his mistake. Asha wanted to say that everything was fine, but the guy interrupted her, saying that next time he would aim better to make her fall. The girl was speechless at these words. The boys began to laugh and say that Kaldrogen had been sending a lot of spies lately. The boys asked her if they understood correctly that she had come here to spy on them. They, the northerners, only know how to steal, and this is not surprising because they are lagging behind in development. The girl screamed, saying that she was not from Caldrogan, but from Calinzia, and that it was a separate country. The boys thanked her for the geography lesson, but said that the fact remains that she was a country bumpkin. One of them asked why she carries wands when she can use her real magic without them. By the way, aren't these inners things? Where did she steal it from? At that moment, a female voice was heard from behind them. The girl said that as far as she remembered, students were not allowed to quarrel on school grounds regardless of the reason. The boys turned their gazes to the girl in confusion. It was Filian Lumien, a charming girl. One of them immediately started saying that they were not arguing. It was just a friendly conversation. The other guy supported these words, saying that it was true, and there was nothing to worry about. In that case, the girl assumed that they would not mind if she reported this friendly conversation. She was sure the dean would be pleased to hear that they had done a wonderful job welcoming their new student. And immediately the guys turned around in horror and started running away, saying that they needed to get out of here immediately. Lumien waved her hair, saying that they were idiots. After that, the girl turned around and asked the new girl if she was okay. Our heroine asked in surprise if she was really telling her this. Lumien asked in surprise if she saw someone else there. The girl apologized and thanked Filian Lumien. However, the girl said that her name was Chloe Lumien. Our heroine said that she was her neighbor. Before they met, she was very interested to know what she looked like. Anyway, they have now met, and so she is very happy to see her. At that moment, Chloe walked away to the fountain, telling the girl that she definitely stood out. Our heroine asked again, and she asked if she really didn't understand. Right now, all eyes in the academy are on her. Asha said she wasn't trying to stand out. Chloe said she wasn't pretending to be ignorant, apparently. Even the highest-ranking aristocrats cannot enter Franger by special admission. Even the dean's grandson must take an entrance exam. Asha was incredibly surprised because Kilts and Eurus acted as if nothing special had happened, but it turned out that this was not the case. Chloe said some people assume she is hiding from Caldrogan, others that she is an Ivory Tower follower. Asha said she is just Asha, nothing more. Our heroine, however, now understood why all the people were looking at her so closely. They must have thought that she got into this through bribery or that she had connections. Chloe also said that everyone is waiting for her test results to be posted on the wall. Asha said that she never thought that was the reason why everyone was so interested in her. The girl asked if she could just lay low. Chloe said there was no need to be ashamed of it. Attention was a good thing, and that meant power. Asha responded by saying that she was only being whispered about behind her back. Is that really power? Chloe said that she had already experienced the unpleasant side of the double-edged sword of attention. Her main concern is whether to turn attention into admiration or let it remain hostile. Asha decided that was too much Chloe, however, did not say it would be easy. Our heroine looked at the girl with admiration and told her that she was very calm and mature. The girl smiled and asked to call her simply Chloe without any formalities. Our heroine laughed and said that she should also just call her Asha. Just at that very moment, a familiar voice began calling the girl, so they both turned around. The source of this voice was Linzio and Mahiran, who were walking towards our heroine. Chloe reacted very strangely when she saw them. She immediately stood up and said goodbye to her, saying that they might meet again. Coming closer, Linzio, surprised, asked the girl if she knew who it was. Was that why she hadn't met them in the library? Asha asked in surprise if he knew Chloe. The guy said that everyone in Franger knows about this angel because her beauty is divine. Asha understood her words immediately. Whether to pay attention to admiration, it depends only on her. By the way, I wonder if all noble children grow up with such a mindset. After some time, the intermediate results of the training were announced. Our heroine was in second place. The girl did not understand how this was possible. She was sure that she had studied the theoretical and practical parts of mystical research very well. The girl assumed that she had missed a couple of questions in geometry or history. In any case, the gap was so small. Asha suddenly wondered if Kilts would be disappointed in her if he found out she hadn't won first place. Meanwhile, the students were whispering in surprise about the new girl. Our heroine in turn thought that she, as a student of Kilts, should study better. She will start repeating her lessons right now. Of course, she will do it right after she goes to the kitten. That is exactly what she decided to do. On the academy grounds, our heroine found a small, fluffy miracle to which she often came to cuddle and check its condition. While courting the cat, she said that she was too charming. Then the girl asked the cat if he wanted some food, or did he not eat human food. At that moment, a classmate approached the girl and asked the girl if he knew correctly that her name was Asha Konak. Our heroine, perplexed, asked why he was asking this if he knew perfectly well who she was since they were in the same class. The guy was Dalkian Amadiu. The girl guessed from his expression that he was there to criticize the new student. She decided to guess what he would say, probably that he didn't like her, firstly because she was a hereditary mage, and secondly because she was a transfer student. And thirdly, she assumed that Dalkian hated the fact that a commoner like her was attending a school for nobles. However, the guy said all three were wrong. Asha asked him to let her know if he found a fourth reason she hadn't heard of before. Dalkian sighed heavily at this point and told the girl that she was getting on his nerves. Asha asked him, confused, what he was talking about, and he told her to be careful with her grades in the future. She shouldn't let herself be overshadowed again. Soon after these words, the guy turned around and went about his business. Our heroine was slightly stunned by this conversation because she didn't understand what had just happened. Who is Loyal Amadieu? He is the one who has made a significant contribution to the development of the Astier nation, a pioneer who showed magic to the general public. This is the founder of Franger and its current dean for many years, the conqueror of wonders, Loyal Amadieu. Dalkian Amadieu, in turn, is the dean's grandson. In that case, Asha was not surprised why the name sounded so familiar. Lincio was surprised that she was studying even during breakfast. Asha, in turn, said that she should wipe the nose of Dalkian Amadieu. However, he had an incredible list of things to do. Our heroine did not understand how this was possible because even her teacher was far from ideal. Mahiran asked the girl what her teacher was bad at. She said that her teacher could never find anything and that he was terrible at cooking. Lincio laughed and said that Dalkian is a pompous turkey, but you shouldn't let yourself be knocked down. It's just his way of making fun of him, almost like a natural occurrence. He had to allow himself to think that he was just being a fool. Mahiran told his friend that he should be less rude, but he couldn't help but agree. Lincio at this point said that the other girls seemed to like Dalkian. They said that he was the perfect representative of the young democracy. However, our heroine shook her head, saying that this couldn't be. She found him very disgusting. Also, looks have nothing to do with liking someone. For example, does Lincio like Chloe just because she has a pretty face? The guy laughed and said that it wasn't true. He liked girls who smiled often, who were bright as the sun, honest with their feelings, and had golden hair just like. Our heroine slammed the table and said that it was true. Not in this life would she like a guy like him. Lincio, shedding a tear, said that she was cute. The action soon moves to our heroine's room. She finally sees that the Kilts box is glowing, which means that he answered. However, before reading the letter, someone knocked on our heroine's room door. As it turned out, it was Chloe, with whom our heroine successfully became friends after that very incident. Once they were settled, our heroine said that this Amadieu is an asshole. Asha asked if Chloe knew what he told her the other day. In the letter, by the way, Kilts said that everything was fine. Hazkan complains about his back, and Prom misses him very much, but they are both healthy. Chloe, by the way, at that moment said that Amadieu is not so bad. Kilts was glad that the girl had found friends she could hang out with. At that point, Asha, perplexed, told Chloe that she would never let her friend date a guy like that. Kilts, in a letter, asked Asha to ignore students who are cold to her. It is not her fault. There are those who have the nasty habit of judging by inheritance, not by deeds. Our heroine said that he was very annoying, to which Chloe said that she could not deny that he was the most enviable Fearaman. The girl asked in confusion what this meant. Kilts continued to say in the letter that she could see everything differently because she always managed to find the good in everything. He hoped that she would gain valuable experience in Franger. Asha told Chloe that she didn't know much about arranged marriages, but she wanted her to meet someone nice and live happily ever after. Chloe asked in surprise who she meant by someone nice. Kilts said that human beauty is like a grain of sand. Up close, you can only see that they are dirty and countless. However, step back and you will find a picturesque sandy beach. Asha, at this point, said that she had in mind someone she liked and who she would love in return. Chloe thanked the girl and said that it was very kind of her. Kilts asked not to be shy to ask him for help if there were any problems. By the time she read this, he hoped she would have already passed her autumn exams, so he wished her well and would wait for her reply. Already after the autumn exams, the weather became worse and colder because winter was approaching. Our heroine was surprised that everyone was so cold. So looking at Lindsio, she said that it was fine here. The guy answered that it was because she was from the north. He also said that he was so cold because he slept with a hot manna stone. The girl said that her grandfather also slept like that because his bones hurt in the cold. Lindsio asked in confusion if he really looked like an old man. Just then, Mahiran came to the boys looking for the boys. Lindsio said that he heard that he was taking private lessons from Professor Muslon. Mahiran said that rumors spread quickly, but it was true. He was interested in gunsmithing. Asha asked if it was about improving with magic. The guy said that it was true, and although there were too few mages to create weapons in such large quantities, he believes that combined with Astier's secret technology, mass production will be possible. At this point, the girl also said that there were several generations of knights in his family. The guy said that everything was correct. Their family is also called Sword by many Caldrogen. He studied sword techniques from the Northerners from a very young age. Asha said she was no longer surprised that he held the wand like a sword. She said that it was even very good because his core was completely stable. Lindsio was happy to hear such high praise from a first-class student. However, he still has a long way to go. He will have to focus on. At this point, our heroine turned around in surprise. She noticed that a crowd of people had gathered around Dalkian, admiring his skills. The boys didn't want to admit it, but his skill was still impeccable. The magic sword he created was simply perfect. At that moment, the guy raised his head because he noticed someone's too intent gaze. Seeing Asha looking at him, the guy immediately smiled slyly and stared at her. The girl snorted, thinking that he might be a talented magician, but she still found him disgusting. Anyway, she went to Mahiran and asked him to help her practice. Mahiran was only happy about this, so after a while our heroine was busy with work. Our heroine twirled her wand and emitted a whole bunch of mana from it. Mahiran, looking at this, said that it was very beautiful. He envies hereditary mages who can freely wield any magic regardless of the element. Asha, at this point, assumed that his element, if she was not mistaken, was water. Was he trying to possess others? The guy said that his elemental test results showed water. Mahiran never thought of studying anything else again. Our heroine at this point asked if she remembered correctly that the Astiers did not believe in the theory of the 5 elements. The guy said that in fact, this is the main difference from northern magic. Personally, he believes that the 5th element acts as an intersection linking the other 4 together. His teacher said that magic was the result of interactions between people and the world. So if you took the caster out of the equation, the whole concept of magic wouldn't exist. In this case, it turns out that the 5th element, the caster, acts as a point of intersection. Asha said that is correct. As long as the caster is convinced, all elements will be open to him. Mahiran then asked why Franger was sending his students to take the aptitude test. Lindsio then asked what they were talking about. Our heroine said that learning several elements takes a lot of time. Focusing on one might be more practical. Mahiran decided that it was convenient. By the way, in practice, magic is not as terrible as Kilts described it. One way or another, the action moves to the library. Asha, taking some book, decided that there was a book useful for Mahiran. The girl began to reach for the top shelf, trying to get the book she needed. However, just before she could take the book, someone got ahead of her and took it. Our heroine turned around in bewilderment, and it turned out that this was the work of Dalkian, who said that he took her first. The girl immediately asked him what he wanted to get for it. The guy said that he wanted to get an introduction to the extended theory of the elements. She was interested in it, right? Our heroine looked at him in bewilderment and said that he didn't even know what she was talking about. In that case, the guy said that it could be so, but it was still a bit boring for him. And still, he did not let her go. And before leaving, he called her. The girl turned around in bewilderment and asked what he wanted from her. The guy pressed her against the wall and began to look closely into her eyes. He decided not to beat around the bush, so he asked the question directly, why was she running away from him? Our heroine nevertheless decided to pretend that she didn't understand, so she asked in surprise what he was talking about. The guy repeated his question. Asha asked if it was so obvious. It was because he hated her. He was offended that her name was on the board below. However, Dalkian said that he had not said that he hated her. Asha, confused, asked if that was not what he had meant. Anyway, if that's all? Then she asked to let her go and move away, because she wants to leave. However, he stopped her again, saying that he was proposing to her to arrange a competition for the winter exam. He was against her. Our heroine was very surprised by this proposal, so she turned around and asked why this was necessary. The guy said that for him it would be an honor as a dean, and for her it would be an honor as her teacher. Asha tried to stop him and ask why she should participate in this. Dalkian thought that the relationship between student and teacher was especially valuable in the North. Our heroine said that it was, but is it related? Anyway, Asha said that she doesn't know why he hates her so much, but if she wins, she wants him to stop talking to her. This request touched the guy incredibly, but he could do nothing but agree. The action moves to Professor Travian's lesson. She announced that instead of the winter exam, there will be practical classes. Normally, the graduating class doesn't take exams like this, but Professor Flenorf got a large shipment of something rare. Someone asked if they were dragon eggs. The professor said that dragon eggs are much larger, and she has a eupaic egg in her hand. These are distant descendants of dragons, a subspecies, if you will. The task will be to open this egg. The guys asked if they should dissect it in the egg stage. Travian said that if they wanted to see it hatch, she wouldn't recommend it. The girl said their safety was more important to her. The victims of the eupaic attack left much to be desired. Soon, the chatter began. Linzio said that even the final exam always included dragon bones or blood. Looking at Asha, he guessed that the Northerners would not like this. Mahiran guessed that the Astiers wanted to say that all that was secret was revealed. Anyway, the guy said that in the North, eupaic are considered very docile. He didn't expect such a sinister description. At this point, our heroine asked in surprise if he would open the egg. The guy replied that he didn't have much of a choice. Looking at this egg, Asha said that this is the whole problem. She does not like the fact that she will have to kill a living creature to get good grades. She really didn't want to dissect a dragon, even if it was some ordinary subspecies. The girl thought for a long time about what to do, but soon the imaginary scales made their choice. She would think of something for her report. Moreover, she understood that she might lose the bet with Dalkian, but no one could force her to kill this egg, not even herself. The girl proudly decided that instead of all this, she would incubate it. Linzio, looking at the thoughtful Asha, assumed that she had something in mind again. Already in the evening, our heroine learned that the natural environment for eupaic is permafrost. They are one of the most unique and beautiful of all mystical creatures. When eupaic grow up, they have 3 pairs of huge wings. The girl assumed that this was not what she was looking for. Where's the part about how they hatch from eggs? At that moment, she found a paragraph about it. So they only hatch 1 egg at a time, and it takes about 2 months to develop. Soon she began to flip through the pages of the book to find at least something important, but unfortunately, she did not find it. She sighed heavily, scratched her head, and decided that she would just keep him warm. Covering eupaic's egg with a blanket, she hoped that the dragon would still be able to hatch. So the action moves to 2 months later. Our heroine was standing in front of Miss Travian, who was saying that she was disappointed in Filian Konak. She even said that her expectations were too high. Our heroine knew that the professor would say that the entire report was a complete lie, but there was one but. She gave her another chance, asking her to do better next time. The girl understood that she had no other choice. She couldn't open this egg. However, before our heroine had time to leave the office, someone grabbed her and dragged her along. The girl turned her head, and to her surprise, noticed that it was Dalkian. She asked what was going on. However, the guy looked at her menacingly and ordered her to follow him silently. She was scared and nodded her head. A moment later, the girl experienced déjà vu because he again pressed her against the wall, only this time he asked why she did it. Asha asked him, confused, what he was talking about. Dalkian replied that he thought they had agreed on a competition. Our heroine forgot herself a little. She was so busy taking care of the egg that she completely forgot about the argument. By the way, at that same moment, she also noticed that he was looking at her while being sad. The girl turned her head, saying that she had lost, so she asked to end it. In turn, he said that he could not accept it because they did not compete properly. Asha said that it was the best she could write. The guy asked not to make him laugh because her report was completely inappropriate. The girl was surprised by these words and asked how he knew that he shouldn't have read it. He said that Professor Trevian showed it to him. She was worried that she was having problems with teaching. Asha asked again, confused, did the professor really show him her notes? The guy said it was true. After these words, a gloomy silence hung in the corridor. Our heroine hung her head down and said that she didn't do the task at all because she felt sorry for the egg. So she faked the report. She looked at Dalkian and asked if he was happy with that answer. He looked at her in confusion and said he didn't understand why that was done since it was their winter exam. Asha asked if he had done the assignment. The guy said that he had cut him up and analyzed everything from the skeleton fluid structure down to the various habits he could deduce from the physical reactions. The guy asked why he should have any doubts because it was not a person. Hearing these words, our heroine was in incredible shock. Literally, without saying a word, the girl kicked him in the leg. The guy, feeling this, was incredibly surprised. Our heroine in turn told Dalkian Amadieu that he was the worst person she had ever met. Soon Linzio was laughing, saying that in her eyes he was like that. When they were little, he was the only one who could touch a dead animal without hesitation. Asha said that this guy was born without emotions. That's why he irritates her with his strange words. Linzio still said that he is not that bad. The guy said that he once mistook him for a girl and he got angry at him. Asha asked in surprise if it was true. Linzio nodded his head, saying that Dalkian had shoulder-length hair and looked like a cute little angel. He took the hairpin from his mother's jewelry box and gave it to him, but he got angry and threw the same hairpin in his face. Asha, hearing this story, was very surprised. Linzio also said that they had a serious fight. He ended up crying and they were stopped. Asha giggled, saying that it was a little funny. The guy also said that if his grandfather hadn't forced him to be nice to him, they would never have gotten along. Our heroine asked why. She also asked about her grandfather. How often does he communicate with him? Does he write letters or telegrams? The guy said he forbade him to communicate with him for the semester. At first, he sent him a telegram every day that he wanted to come back. However, our heroine reminded him that he was very proud to have entered Franger when they first met in Arenden. Our heroine even said that this is what made her want to come here. The guy looked down at this point, embarrassed. In truth, he had been watching her for several days before finally speaking. He realized that they were about the same age, so he hoped that they could become friends. And so they finally met like this and still study in the same class. Linzio sincerely said that he was glad to see her again. Already in the evening, walking along the corridor, our heroine told herself that she was also very glad to meet Linzio again, but she didn't know if she could say the same about this academy, which seemed uncomfortable to her. Asha had no doubt that the magic of Astier was simply amazing. Every day, various studies are published from them. Mastering magic enriches people's lives. It also creates an inexorable desire to invent useful tools. Astier de Luynes. It is a city of light that brings people genuine joy. Our heroine understood that it was not all that bad, but she did not want to agree with Astier's fundamental beliefs. In her opinion, magic should be mysterious and secretive. Stroking the Upake egg, Asha said that she was the only one left among her kind. This, by the way, was similar to the magic of Kilts. She must keep his secret because the world does not need to know about it. She also knew that there was no need to break the egg and see what was inside. Soon the girl decided to read a book because she had not done this for a long time. Her choice fell on a report on the physiological effects of magical power on the human body prepared by Ascadian. When an ordinary person comes into contact with a high concentration of mana, it causes a negative reaction in which the body attacks itself and eventually collapses. This is all done by introducing magic into subjects born without mana sensitivity. Also, all this happens without measuring the various reactions. The report itself is designed to develop countermeasures against this phenomenon. Asha began reading about the subjects. Number 9 complains of sharp pain in the eyes after the introduction of mana. Our heroine soon closed the book. She didn't want to believe it, but this handwriting definitely belonged to Kilts. Having arrived here, our heroine learned a lot, so such inhumane actions no longer shock her. Somehow, even though it must be lonely to live so long, after some time, winter came. The face full of contempt, as always, was Dalkian, who passed by Asha. Our heroine did not understand what was wrong with him, and Mahiran asked her not to worry because he was not worthy of her attention. Asha laughed and told the guy that he can be very cruel. Anyway, it's time for the founding festival. The girl asked if there would be a celebration in Arenville Mahiran, said that unlike the Northerners, the Astiers do not celebrate their foundation day. Asha asked in confusion if they do nothing at the beginning of a new year. Mahiran said that because of many facts, they hate to admit the impact on them. At this point, our heroine said that she had to run errands. She said that she needed to stop by Arenville so they would see each other next week. The guy smiled and asked if she was really going on an excursion in such weather with all this snow. Our heroine said that everything is fine because the postman said that he could not come today, so she goes to the post office to pick up her gifts from home. The guy asked if he could walk her home since it was safer together, to which our heroine replied that everything was fine. She grew up in the very backwoods of Calinzia. After a while, they were walking through snowdrifts, and the guy asked if the teacher had really sent her a gift for the founding festival. Asha said that it was, but it was also a gift for her birthday. Mahiran said in surprise that he wished he had known about her birthday earlier. The girl said that she had decided to make the foundation festival her birthday since she did not know when her real birthday was. The guy, confused, began to apologize, saying that he did not want to offend her. The girl waved her hand and said that everything was fine. In that case, he decided to ask what happened to her parents. Our heroine said that she was from Nirmaz. She lived with her stepfather before she met her teacher. Her stepfather told her that he found her on the beach one day, so she doesn't know who her real parents are. At this point, our heroine asked him if he had received anything in honor of the festival. The guy said he probably wouldn't get anything because he was considered the black sheep of the family. Asha asked in confusion how that could be. The boy said that his family didn't like that he not only failed to become a knight but also went to another country to study. Asha said that was clear, but why didn't he become a knight? Mahiran pointed to his hand and said that he could not use it. Asha guiltily began to say that she did not know and that she was asking for forgiveness. The boy said that it was okay because it didn't interfere with his daily life. However, he would like to help his older brother in some way. By the way, the guy decided to say that he told this story only to her. Asha asked what it meant. The guy replied that he personally believed that Caldrogan would face destruction and decline if it did not learn to imitate Astier's technology. Our heroine looked at him and asked if he really thought so. The guy said that all the magicians of the Ivory Tower had long since gone to the other side of the world. His Majesty is currently unable to rule, as treacherous as that may sound. Astier is using the moment to increase his power. By the way, even now, he is preparing for war against Izmikan. Our heroine asked if he really believed that Astier would start a war. The guy replied that before she entered this academy, there was a student named Inerl de Armand. Asha said that she heard that she left the academy in the middle of the semester. However, the guy said that she did not leave the academy but was expelled. The D'Armand family was the most aggressive in the war as a whole, which was natural. However, the head of the family, Dean Luael, became dissatisfied with his child. The so-called cleansing would be a more accurate description of what happened to Inerl. The next day, our heroine couldn't stop thinking about Inerl d'Armand. Was this her room? The girl sighed and began to open the box, deciding that she would ask Chloe about this later. Opening the box, our heroine saw a carrot cake. The signature was a wish for a little star. It was Pram's handwriting. She knew it was his doing. However, our heroine also found something on the back of the note. There was a short and laconic inscription on it. I helped. No doubt it was written in Grandpa's hand. In any case, she began to open the other gifts. Our heroine noticed the next gift, a beautiful snow-white robe. It must have been from Kilts. It was so soft and pleasant to the touch. The girl decided that she would keep it for a special occasion. At that moment, she heard a strange noise behind her, so she turned her head to check. The reason for this was that the egg was apparently already hatching. She knew it would happen soon, but she wasn't ready yet. The girl ran to the egg in horror, thinking about Professor Travian's words. She had to fight off Upake with this robe. However, there was no need to do this. As soon as the egg was crushed, a snow-white Upake crawled out of it and even purred. Our heroine was incredibly touched because he is charming. Nothing that Professor Travian said is true. The baby immediately accepted the girl as his mother, so he rushed to lick her. Our heroine was only happy about this. She said that he was white as snow, and she would call him Ease. After some time, our heroine sat down at the table because she needed to write something to her family. By the way, Kilts seems disappointed that she has never been home since she started studying at Franger. All his letters are full of disappointment. In any case, when she took up the letter, she decided that she would not mention Lincio, but what to write about. She wasn't sure that nothing would arouse Kilts's suspicions. Looking at Ease, our heroine asked if he wanted to go for a walk. He joyfully began to kiss the girl's hand, making it clear that he really wanted to go for a walk. Our heroine wrapped him in a scarf, saying that she knew he was uncomfortable, but she asked him not to move. After some time, she came to a place where she could let Ease roam freely. She was very happy that Ease liked the place. She thinks that all her research was not in vain. However, at that moment, Yupik, for some unknown reason, assumed a fighting stance. Our heroine grabbed him, saying that he should be quieter. No one should hear them. Somehow she didn't understand what had upset the little boy so much. At that very moment, a familiar voice was heard behind our heroine asking Konak what she was doing there.